On a bright and peaceful day, birds chirp cheerfully beneath a clear blue sky while a gentle breeze drifts across the open field. In the middle of the grassy ground, a young girl lies comfortably on her back, enjoying the warmth of the sunlight. She slowly stretches both of her arms above her head before letting out a long sigh of relief. In her mind, she reflects that it has already been 4 years and 10 months since she came to this place. After calculating the remaining time, she realizes that she only needs to endure 2 more months. The wind brushes against her face, causing her hair to sway gently. A hopeful smile appears on her lips, and a sparkle fills her eyes as she thinks that this dreadful life as a maid will finally come to an end. The story then shifts into the past. The girl explains that she originally lived in South Korea as an ordinary 25-year-old office worker. Her life had been completely normal until one night when she fell asleep while reading a novel, something she often did after work. However, when she opened her eyes again, everything had changed. Instead of waking up in her apartment, she found herself in the body of a 13-year-old girl. The sudden change in her surroundings threw her into complete panic. At the present time, she knows that she had been transported into the world of a novel, but back then, she had absolutely no way of knowing such a thing. For this reason, she spent her days overwhelmed with confusion, unable to understand where she was or what had happened to her. Even in the middle of her panic, however, her instincts continuously warned her not to attract unnecessary attention. Because of this, she decides that the safest course of action is to remain quiet and focus entirely on the work in front of her. Rather than causing trouble or asking too many questions, she spends her days carrying out her duties as a maid. She washes clothes, cleans various areas, and completes every task assigned to her while trying her best to adapt to her unfamiliar situation. Approximately a week later, while she is busy doing laundry, an unexpected hand suddenly reaches toward her. The moment she notices it, panic immediately takes over, and she instinctively begins running away. The owner of the hand quickly chases after her, while loudly shouting that she had been told to come home every 5 days. The harsh voice frightens her so much that tears begin forming in her eyes as she is scolded. The person chasing her turns out to be Madame Shin Gyum, a woman who specifically came looking for her. The older woman angrily complains that this tiny shrimp seems to think she can ignore her own grandmother simply because she became a maid in the demonic cult's castle. The girl freezes after hearing the word grandmother. Confusion immediately fills her mind. She stares at the woman with a bewildered expression, causing the older woman to become even more irritated. The woman questions why she is making such a face and asks whether she has already forgotten her own grandmother's appearance. Meanwhile, the girl's thoughts become increasingly chaotic. Since she is not the real Seol Ha, she has absolutely no idea who this woman truly is. She desperately wonders what she should say and worries that one wrong answer might expose her. Before she can think of a response, the woman firmly grabs her hand and announces that they are leaving. Just like that, the older woman seizes her by the earlobe and drags her away. The girl winces in pain while stumbling after her. As they walk, the woman explains that she has already spoken with the people in charge. The girl can only think about how terrifying this woman is. Her ear hurts terribly, and she becomes convinced that she is moments away from being severely punished. Contrary to her expectations, however, the situation unfolds very differently. The moment they arrive home, her grandmother does not scold or beat her. Instead, she immediately prepares a meal and boils meat especially for her. The delicious aroma quickly fills the room. As the steaming dish is placed in front of her, her mouth begins watering at the sight. After spending so much time living as a servant, such a meal feels incredibly luxurious. Her grandmother gently pats her head and remarks that she has already lost far too much weight in only a few days. The elderly woman urges her to hurry and eat, explaining that she specifically bought good quality meat from the market for her sake. The girl quietly listens while lowering her head. Watching her grandmother continuously place more meat into her bowl, she finally begins to understand something important. For a long time, she had wondered why the original owner of this body had accepted a maid position in such a dangerous place, filled with terrifying people. Now the answer becomes obvious. Everything had been done for the sake of this grandmother. The elderly woman had endured countless hardships while raising her granddaughter alone, and the original Seol Ha had accepted such difficult work in order to support her. After remaining silent for a moment, the girl explains that even if she wanted to quit, she cannot do so. Since a contract has already been signed, she is obligated to fulfill it. Her grandmother responds that she already understands this, Nevertheless, she repeatedly warns her to be careful. According to her, it is extremely unlikely that an ordinary maid would ever encounter the cult leader or the young masters directly. Even so, she insists that one can never know what might happen inside such a dangerous place. For this reason, she tells her granddaughter to remain cautious at all times. Most importantly, she specifically warns her about the first young master, Jeokwi Baek. The moment those words are spoken, the atmosphere seems to grow heavier. Her grandmother explains that Jeokwi Baek is infamous throughout the demonic cult for being exceptionally cruel. Although he has not yet officially inherited the position, he is currently considered the strongest candidate to become the next minor cult leader. His strength, talent, and influence place him far ahead of the other successors. The instant she hears the name Jeokwi Baek, the girl's eyes widen dramatically. A chill runs down her spine. Unlike everyone else, she knows exactly who that person is. After all, she has read the novel. Among the many terrifying individuals who exist within the demonic cult, Jeokwi Baek is one of the most dangerous and frightening figures in the entire story. His name alone is enough to make her feel uneasy, and hearing that she is currently working in the same place as him immediately fills her with dread. The words minor cult leader candidate continue echoing inside her mind long after her grandmother finishes speaking. Seeing the uneasy expression on her granddaughter's face, the elderly woman gives her one final warning. She explains that people like them are insignificant servants, and nothing good can ever come from attracting the attention of the future heavenly demon. She advises that if she ever happens to cross paths with him, she must immediately lower her head, avoid making eye contact, and quietly leave without drawing even the slightest bit of attention to herself. The moment the words, "the next heavenly demon," leave her grandmother's mouth, another memory suddenly surfaces within her mind. Those words sound incredibly familiar. She immediately recalls that the same title repeatedly appeared throughout the martial arts novel she had been reading shortly before she arrived in this world. A feeling of disbelief slowly washes over her. Unable to ignore the growing suspicion inside her heart, she cautiously asks if the second young master's name happens to be Jeokyi Gyeon. Her grandmother looks slightly puzzled by the question before replying that she is indeed talking about Jeokyi Jeon. The confirmation leaves her completely speechless. Instead of relief, overwhelming frustration fills her heart. Out of all the countless novels she could have been reincarnated into, it has to be this one. The title of that novel is The Descent of the Heavenly Demon, an incredibly popular martial arts series that revolves around the birth of the strongest heavenly demon in the history of the demonic cult. The story explores the endless conflicts between the orthodox faction, the unorthodox faction, and the demonic cult itself. While its world-building and political struggles attract countless readers, the greatest reason for its overwhelming popularity is the protagonist's unmatched martial prowess, alongside the thrilling and fast-paced action that constantly keeps readers on edge. The protagonist of that novel is none other than Jeokyi Jeon. She remembers that every single time he appears in the story, the narration describes him as a man blessed with peerless beauty. Combined with his naturally cold and taciturn personality, he enjoys almost unrivaled popularity throughout the demonic cult. Countless female disciples admire him, while many others respect and fear him for his overwhelming strength. To outsiders, he appears to be the perfect young master with extraordinary talent and an incomparably handsome appearance. However, she knows that image is nothing more than a beautiful mask. His true nature is far more horrifying than anyone can possibly imagine. Simply put, he is the devil himself. She vividly remembers numerous scenes from the novel that reveal his genuine personality. Whenever he happens to be in a bad mood, he does not hesitate to tear apart his own subordinates merely for catching his attention at the wrong moment. Human lives mean absolutely nothing to him. One particularly horrifying memory resurfaces as she recalls that he once strangled a woman he had slept with, simply because he considered her manners unpleasant. Even members of his own family are not spared from his cruelty. Without showing the slightest hesitation, he eventually slaughters both his brothers and even his own father. His actions are so merciless and devoid of emotion that even readers often describe him as a complete psychopath, born once in an entire generation. After remembering all of those terrifying events, she quietly reaches a conclusion. Since there is absolutely no way for her to return to her original world, she has no choice but to continue living here. For this reason, avoiding Jeokyi Gyeon becomes her highest priority above everything else. Fortunately, She realizes that she has transmigrated into this world several years before the original story even begins. At the present time, none of the major events from the novel have taken place yet. Therefore, all she needs to do is survive the remaining 5-year period of her employment contract as a castle maid while keeping the lowest possible profile. As long as she never attracts Gyeokgi-gyeon's attention, she should be able to leave safely before the story truly starts. The story then returns to the present. Standing peacefully within the castle grounds, she smiles to herself while thinking that after enduring countless hardships for so many years, her contract will finally come to an end in just 2 months. The thought alone fills her with excitement. For the first time in years, she allows herself to dream about the future. She begins wondering what she should do after finally leaving the demonic cult. The answer comes to her almost immediately. First, she decides that she will take her grandmother and leave this dangerous place forever. If they settle somewhere far away from the demonic cult, there will be no chance of becoming entangled with Gyeokgi-gyeon or any of the horrifying events destined to occur in the future. They will finally be able to live peacefully and safely. As she continues imagining that future, another dream forms in her heart. Perhaps she and her grandmother can travel together to beautiful places filled with breathtaking scenery. After living frugally throughout these difficult years and carefully saving every coin she earns as a maid, she has managed to accumulate a respectable amount of money. It may not make them wealthy, but it should be more than enough to begin a quiet and comfortable life somewhere far away from all the bloodshed and violence. A warm smile naturally appears across her face as she continues daydreaming about her peaceful future. However, before she can enjoy those pleasant thoughts any longer, someone suddenly calls out her name from a distance. Seol-ha! She immediately turns around after hearing the familiar voice. A young girl comes running toward her in a great hurry, breathing heavily as though she has been searching everywhere. The newcomer, So-okay, finally reaches her before asking what she is doing there and complaining that she has been looking for her everywhere. Seol-ha tilts her head in confusion and asks whether something has happened. Instead of answering immediately, So-okay suddenly grabs both of her hands with great excitement. Barely able to contain herself, she asks what kind of incredible luck Seol-ha was born with before happily congratulating her. She excitedly reveals that she has just heard the news that Seol-ha has been assigned as the personal maid of the second young master. The words strike Seol-ha like a bolt of lightning. While So-okay beams with envy and excitement, Seol-ha's face instantly turns pale with terror. Completely unaware of her reaction, So-okay continues talking enthusiastically. She explains that all of the young maids inside the castle are currently going crazy with jealousy. After all, countless girls dream of serving the impossibly handsome second young master, yet Seol-ha has somehow been chosen instead of all of them. Meanwhile, Seol-ha remains completely silent. Her expression slowly stiffens, and a nervous frown appears on her face. Inside her mind, only one thought echoes over and over. What kind of absolute bullshit is this? The next scene takes place inside the demonic cult's castle. Standing directly in front of Seol-ha is a woman whose mere presence commands respect from everyone around her. She is Madame Gwak, the head maid of the demonic cult and one of the highest-ranking servants in the entire castle. The moment Seol-ha sees her, her eyes widen in disbelief. Until now, a part of her had still hoped that the rumors were false, or that some kind of misunderstanding had occurred. However, seeing Madame Gwak personally standing before her immediately destroys those hopes. Her legs suddenly feel weak, and she nearly loses the strength to remain standing. Meanwhile, Madame Gwak calmly explains that the second young master is somewhat of a clean freak. For this reason, finding a suitable personal maid is not an easy task. She further explains that she specifically recommended Seol-ha after carefully observing her work over the years. In Madame Gwak's opinion, Seol-ha is intelligent, capable, hardworking, and efficient. Therefore, she believed Seol-ha would be the perfect candidate for the position. After noticing Seol-ha's shocked expression, Madame Gwak smiles warmly and remarks that she appears quite surprised. Mistaking her reaction entirely, she jokingly adds that there is no need to thank her so much. At that moment, tears begin forming in Seol-ha's eyes. However, the reasons behind those tears are completely different from what Madame Gwak imagines. While the head maid interprets them as tears of gratitude, Seol-ha is internally crying in pure despair. At the same time, she cannot help understanding Madame Gwak's misunderstanding. From the perspective of people living in this world, becoming a personal maid to one of the young masters is practically the equivalent of receiving a major promotion. Not only does the position come with a significant increase in salary, but it also provides opportunities to attract the attention of powerful figures within the castle. If one is fortunate enough to leave a favorable impression, their entire future could change overnight. In short, for an ordinary maid, this is the sort of opportunity that would normally warrant bowing 100 times in gratitude. Unfortunately, that only applies under normal circumstances. Suppressing her panic, Seol-ha politely thanks Madame Gwak for thinking so highly of her abilities, before carefully explaining that she does not believe she is suitable for the role. Madame Gwak raises an eyebrow and asks what exactly she means by that. Seol-ha quickly begins presenting what she believes is the perfect excuse. She explains that she had already been planning to leave her position as a maid in only 2 months. Furthermore, she says that she has been increasingly worried about her grandmother. Due to her advanced age, her grandmother's health is no longer what it once was, and Seol-ha wishes to spend more time taking care of her. Madame Gwak listens quietly before nodding her head. She remarks that if Seol-ha truly feels that strongly about it, then perhaps it cannot be helped. The moment those words leave her mouth, excitement erupts inside Seol-ha. Internally, she nearly celebrates. Her plan worked, or at least, that is what she believes. A victorious smile almost appears on her face as she imagines escaping the horrifying position entirely. Then Madame Gwak calmly continues speaking and explains that since she had been completely convinced Seol-ha would accept the promotion, she had not prepared an alternative candidate beforehand. Therefore, Seol-ha should simply serve as the second young master's personal maid during the remaining 2 months of her employment. The smile immediately vanishes from Seol-ha's face. She freezes completely as her carefully crafted escape plan collapses in an instant. After staring blankly for several seconds, she finally manages to ask what exactly Madame Gwak means. The headmaid explains that 2 months should be more than enough time for her to identify and train a suitable replacement. Until then, Seol-ha will continue serving as the personal maid of the second young master. Seol-ha's mouth hangs open in disbelief. Desperation quickly returns as she argues that it would make far more sense to assign someone else from the beginning, rather than appointing a temporary maid only to replace her later. Unfortunately, Madame Gwak remains completely unconvinced. She points out that there are very few maids in the castle who work as efficiently as Seol-ha. Furthermore, literacy is surprisingly uncommon among servants. Since Seol-ha can both read and write, she possesses qualifications that many others lack. Before Seol-ha can continue protesting, Madame Gwak firmly states that the matter has already been decided. Starting tomorrow morning, Seol-ha is to report directly to the second young master's residence. Immediately afterward, Madame Gwak hands her a thick booklet and orders her to memorize every single detail contained inside before the day ends. Looking at the booklet now resting in her hands, Seol-ha feels as though the sky is collapsing around her. In complete disbelief, she tries one final time to object. However, before she can even finish her sentence, Madame Gwak simply asks whether the instructions are understood. Seol-ha falls silent. At that moment, Madame Gwak's gentle smile somehow appears far more terrifying than outright anger. The pressure emanating from the headmaid is overwhelming. As a result, Seol-ha finds herself unable to speak another word of protest. After several agonizing seconds, she can only lower her head and reluctantly answer yes. Later that day, the scene shifts to Seol-ha's home. The moment she arrives, she immediately tells her grandmother everything that happened. After listening to the entire story, her grandmother stares at her for a moment before asking whether she had been crying all day, simply because she did not want to become the second young master's personal maid. Seol-ha tearfully admits that this is exactly the reason. Her grandmother then explains that when she first saw her crying so miserably, she assumed something terrible had happened. She had thought Seol-ha might have been injured or perhaps lost all of her savings. Never once had she imagined that her granddaughter was sobbing merely because of a promotion. Hearing this interpretation leaves Seol-ha completely dumbfounded. Her mouth falls open in shock before she loudly protests that it is not simply a matter of disliking the job. In her mind, the situation is much more serious. She insists that if she makes even a single mistake, her head could literally be separated from her body. Her grandmother immediately scolds her for speaking such nonsense. The elderly woman asks whether the second young master is some sort of human butcher who executes people for every tiny mistake. According to her, any mistake a young maid like Seol-ha might make would surely be something trivial. Therefore, she cannot understand why the second young master would ever resort to cutting off someone's head over such matters. Unfortunately, Seol-ha knows information that her grandmother does not. She desperately explains that people like the young masters do not even view maids as human beings. To individuals of their status, the life of a servant is often worth no more than an insect. Before she can continue speaking, however, her grandmother suddenly smacks her on the head. Seol-ha immediately cries out in pain. Her grandmother sternly reminds her that she willingly joined the demonic cult, despite all the warnings she received in the past. Since she ignored those warnings back then, she has no right to complain about the consequences now. Seol-ha rubs her head while silently suffering. At the same time, she feels completely helpless. After all, she cannot exactly explain that it was the original Seol-ha who chose this path, not her. While these thoughts run through her mind, her grandmother begins serving dinner. Placing food in front of her, the elderly woman remarks that an empty stomach is clearly filling her head with ridiculous thoughts. For this reason, she tells her to stop worrying and eat properly. Seol-ha weakly responds that she does not really have an appetite. Her grandmother clicks her tongue in annoyance and gives her a sharp stare. Under that pressure, Seol-ha eventually starts eating. As she slowly picks at her meal, another thought suddenly enters her mind. She asks whether anyone mentioned why the previous personal maid left the position. Her grandmother asks whether she is referring to the maid who served before her. Seol-ha nods. The elderly woman points out that the predecessor's departure is ultimately the reason the position was assigned to her. Therefore, she asks whether Seol-ha heard any details regarding what happened. As Seol-ha continues eating, she begins recalling fragments of the original novel. There are not many descriptions concerning ordinary maids within the story. Nevertheless, based on the events she remembers and the overall nature of the demonic cult, she arrives at a rather disturbing conclusion. After several moments of silence, she calmly states that the previous maid is probably no longer alive. The words leave her mouth so casually that they almost sound ordinary. However, the effect they have is anything but ordinary. Across the table, her grandmother's eyes instantly widen in shock as she stares at her granddaughter in complete disbelief and blurts out a startled question. Unable to understand how Seol-ha could arrive at such a terrifying conclusion so naturally. After hearing Seol-ha's conclusion, her grandmother's expression immediately hardens. She stares at her granddaughter as though she has just heard something completely ridiculous, and asks whether she even understands what she is saying. The elderly woman questions whether Seol-ha is truly certain that the previous maid is no longer alive. Seol-ha quickly explains that she did not witness anything herself. She admits that she has no concrete evidence and is only making assumptions. However, she points out that there are numerous rumors surrounding the young masters, especially the first young master. According to those rumors, he enjoys experimenting with poison. If such stories contain even a fraction of the truth, then surviving while serving powerful figures within the demonic cult would naturally be extremely difficult. Rather than appearing convinced, her grandmother only seems to grow more irritated. After silently listening for a moment, the elderly woman abruptly tells Seol-ha to come upstairs to the second floor immediately after finishing her meal. The sudden instruction leaves Seol-ha confused. She wonders what could possibly be important enough to require such seriousness. Without offering any further explanation, her grandmother simply gets up from her seat and remarks that she has something to give her before walking away. For a while afterward, Seol-ha remains seated at the table, puzzled by the mysterious announcement. Once she finishes eating, she heads upstairs to her grandmother's room. Inside the room, her grandmother approaches an old cabinet before retrieving a small box. The moment the box is opened, Seol-ha's eyes nearly pop out of their sockets. Her jaw drops in complete disbelief. Inside rests a poison-warding pearl. Immediately recognizing the treasure, she cannot help shouting in shock and asking why something as precious as a poison-warding pearl, an item that is difficult to obtain even with large amounts of money, is suddenly appearing from her grandmother's cabinet. Without hesitation, her grandmother pushes the box into her hands. However, this only causes Seol-ha to become even more alarmed. A horrifying possibility suddenly enters her mind. She immediately asks whether her grandmother secretly spent all the money she had earned over the years while working as a maid. The accusation causes the elderly woman to raise her voice as well. She asks whether Seol-ha thinks she is crazy. After all, why would she spend the hard-earned savings that her granddaughter accumulated through years of difficult labor? Hearing that answer only creates another question. If her grandmother did not buy it with her savings, then where in the world did such a valuable treasure come from? When asked this, the elderly woman places a finger against her lips and gives a strangely suspicious expression. After making an awkward face, she casually claims that some clumsy customer accidentally left it behind. The explanation leaves Seol-ha completely speechless. After staring blankly for several seconds, she loudly points out that the story makes absolutely no sense. She asks what kind of lunatic would leave a poison-warding pearl behind at a noodle shop. Her grandmother, however, remains completely unbothered. She argues that the world is full of strange people. For this reason, she sees no reason why someone could not accidentally leave behind a poison-warding pearl. Furthermore, she downplays the item's value by saying that it is not even that expensive. Naturally, Seol-ha finds that statement impossible to believe. Ignoring her granddaughter's skepticism, the elderly woman continues explaining that although the pearl cannot protect against the most deadly poisons, such as formless poison or silver firefly poison sand, it is still far better than having no protection at all. Seol-ha lowers her gaze toward the pearl resting in her hands. The more she looks at it, the more amazed she becomes. Even if it is not a perfect treasure, it remains an incredibly useful item, especially for someone about to serve one of the most dangerous characters in the novel. Seeing her reaction, her grandmother casually remarks that if she truly does not want it, there is no need to force herself to take it. The moment those words leave her mouth, Seol-ha immediately hugs the box tightly against her chest. She loudly declares that she absolutely wants it and begs her grandmother to let her keep it. Before the elderly woman can respond, Seol-ha leans forward and plants a kiss on her grandmother's cheek. With a bright smile, she thanks her repeatedly and says that her grandmother is the only family she has in this world. Although her grandmother grumbles in embarrassment, a small smile still appears on her face. Meanwhile, Seol-ha stares at the pearl once more. Deep down, she knows the explanation regarding its origin is highly suspicious. However, she quickly decides that the details do not matter. There is no way her grandmother would intentionally give her something harmful. For this reason, she chooses not to think too deeply about where it came from. The important thing is that she now possesses a poison-warding pearl. From her perspective, this is an unexpected blessing. As she carefully stores the treasure away, she silently makes a promise. No matter what happens, she will survive. She promises herself that she will stay alive long enough to leave the demonic cult together with her grandmother. After all, only 2 months remain. They simply need to endure a little longer. Trying to lighten the mood, Seol-ha remarks that at least she probably will not die while testing food for poison anymore. Rather than finding the joke amusing, her grandmother immediately scolds her. The elderly woman asks whether such a thing is really appropriate to say in front of one's grandmother. The following day finally arrives. Seol-ha makes her way toward the residence of the second young master. As she walks through the castle grounds, she reflects on the situation. She already knows that Gyeokgi-jeon is incredibly popular throughout the demonic cult. For this reason, she expected some amount of jealousy from the other maids after receiving the position of personal maid. However, what greets her exceeds even her expectations. Groups of maids stand gathered throughout the area, whispering among themselves. The moment she passes by, numerous pairs of eyes immediately turn toward her. Their gazes are far from friendly. Some appear jealous, others seem openly hostile. Many look at her as though she has committed some unforgivable crime. The atmosphere becomes so uncomfortable that Seol-ha can practically feel the hostility pressing against her skin. A helpless expression appears on her face. She cannot help thinking that today is already becoming exhausting before her duties have even begun. As she continues walking while lost in thought, a voice suddenly calls out to her. The sharp tone immediately causes her to stop. Turning toward the source of the voice, she finds a maid standing nearby. The girl's expression is anything but friendly. Without bothering to hide her displeasure, the maid looks Seol-ha up and down before angrily remarking that she did not seem like the type. Yet apparently she possesses quite a lot of nerve. Caught completely off guard, Seol-ha blinks in confusion and politely asks what she means. At the same time, a question appears inside her mind. Looking at the unfamiliar faces gathered around the maid, she cannot help wondering exactly who these girls are and why they seem to hate her so much before she has even spoken a single word. As Seol-ha stares at the maid who called out to her, A vague sense of familiarity begins forming in her mind. She feels as though she has seen that face somewhere before. After thinking carefully, she vaguely recalls seeing the woman among the senior maids during her second year of service. Unfortunately, she cannot remember the exact name. It might have been Due or something similar. Regardless of the details, it is immediately obvious that the woman did not approach her with friendly intentions. The senior maid folds her arms and looks Seolha up and down with open disdain. She remarks that despite her low status, she certainly seems to care a great deal about appearances. Then, without any hesitation, she loudly questions how someone like Seolha could dare aim for the second young master. Hearing such an absurd accusation leaves Seolha completely bewildered. She immediately denies it, insisting that such a thing is not true. Unfortunately, the denial only seems to encourage the other woman further. The senior maid narrows her eyes and asks whether Seolha's ultimate goal is to become the mistress of Jeonnyeong Pavilion, the residence of the second young master. Once again, Seolha firmly rejects the accusation. However, the woman refuses to listen. She mocks Seolha by asking whether she truly believes the second young master would ever spare someone like her a second glance. According to her, Seolha should wake up from her fantasy before embarrassing herself any further. Listening to the accusations, Seolha can only smile inwardly. In reality, she finds the entire situation ridiculous. If anyone is living inside a fantasy, it is certainly not her. The ones daydreaming are clearly these senior maids. After all, unlike them, she knows exactly what kind of person Jeokgi Jeon truly is. The senior maid then changes tactics. A sneer appears on her face as she remarks that she heard Seolha lives alone with her grandmother and has no parents. Therefore, she must have grown up without proper education or upbringing. The moment her grandmother becomes the topic of conversation, Seolha's expression darkens. Until now, she has been willing to tolerate the insults directed at herself. However, insulting her grandmother is an entirely different matter. Completely unaware of the warning signs, the woman continues speaking. She asks whether it is true that Seolha's grandmother operates a humble noodle shop. Then, with a mocking laugh, she wonders whether the elderly woman instructed her granddaughter to seduce a high-ranking official so that they could live comfortably for the rest of their lives. The two women standing beside her immediately burst into laughter. Together, the three of them continue ridiculing Seolha and her grandmother. One of them even comments that the grandmother apparently taught her granddaughter the perfect skills for someone of her status. Throughout the entire exchange, Seolha remains silent. Seeing no response, the senior maid begins mocking her again. Pretending to be concerned, she teasingly asks whether Seolha suddenly became mute. After all, a senior has been speaking for quite some time, yet there has not been a single reply. At that moment, Seolha finally smiles. Unfortunately for them, it is not a pleasant smile. She calmly asks whether they have really been waiting for an answer all this time. The sudden question catches the women off guard. Without changing her expression, Seolha continues speaking. She explains that she would gladly respond if they were actually saying something that resembled human speech. Unfortunately, all she hears is complete nonsense. Since she cannot understand a single word of that nonsense, she naturally has no way to reply. She further remarks that there are many things she is capable of doing. However, understanding gibberish is not one of them. The atmosphere instantly freezes. The three women stare at her in disbelief. For a brief moment, none of them can process what they just heard. Then their faces begin turning red with anger. The senior maid shouts furiously, demanding to know whether Seolha truly believes she can say whatever she wants without consequences. Unable to contain herself any longer, she suddenly extends her hand towards Seolha. Her expression clearly indicates that she intends to teach her a lesson. The woman declares that today Seolha will absolutely learn her place. However, before her hand can make contact, Seolha casually sidesteps the attack. The movement is so smooth and effortless that everyone present becomes stunned. The senior maid freezes for a moment before becoming even angrier. She declares that Seolha must be tired of living if she dares oppose her. Immediately afterward, she begins utilizing martial techniques. Energy gathers around her movements as she swings her arm once more. This time, however, something unexpected happens. Instead of striking Seolha, the attack somehow fails completely. A moment later, the woman loses her balance and crashes onto the ground. Her expression becomes filled with shock. The other two women standing nearby are equally stunned. None of them understand what just happened. Meanwhile, Seolha calmly brushes dust from her clothes. A small smile appears on her face as she explains that her grandmother always insisted that a young girl must know how to protect herself. For this reason, she received various forms of self-defense training from an early age. Since the seniors seem so interested in picking fights, she would be more than happy to demonstrate exactly what she learned. The three women become speechless. Their faces twist with humiliation and anger. One of them finally manages to shout that a junior dare not oppose a senior who stands as high as the sky itself. The three women begin yelling simultaneously, their voices echoing throughout the castle grounds. Sometime later, the scene changes. The once confident trio now stands together with large bumps on their heads. The result of the confrontation is obvious. Not a single one of them managed to gain the upper hand. Seol-ha stands calmly before them, while the three women glare at her with resentful expressions. She explains that they seem to have developed a massive misunderstanding regarding her motives. Out of all the maids in the castle, she is probably the one person who has absolutely zero interest in the second young master. The women stare at her in disbelief. One of them immediately asks what she means by that. Seol-ha casually explains that she possesses rather unique tastes. For this reason, she absolutely hates handsome men. In her eyes, the second young master is not some dreamlike prince. He is a complete disaster. She asks who in their right mind would voluntarily seek the attention of a walking disaster. The answer, from her perspective, is obviously nobody. Since matters are already so clear, she sincerely hopes they will stop bothering her over the same issue in the future. After saying this, she asks whether all three of them understand. The women remain silent. Their expressions make it obvious that they are furious. Unfortunately, none of them have anything they can say in response. Seol-ha then suddenly raises her voice. Startled by the abrupt change, the three women jump in surprise. Without hesitation, Seol-ha orders them to stop standing around and hurry to Jeonnyeong Pavilion to complete their cleaning duties. The authority in her voice is so unexpected that all three women instinctively obey. Before they even realize what they are doing, they begin walking away. Only after several steps do they realize they have been ordered around by a junior maid, causing their expressions to become even more twisted with frustration. Meanwhile, hidden beneath the shade of a nearby tree, an entirely different scene is unfolding. A man sits quietly beneath the branches, unnoticed by everyone present. He has witnessed the entire exchange from beginning to end. After listening to everything Seol-ha said, including her passionate declaration about despising handsome men and considering the second young master a disaster, he remains silent for a long moment. Then, at last, he lets out a quiet sigh. A strange expression appears on his face as he slowly repeats a single phrase: a disaster. The words drift softly through the air while his gaze remains fixed on the retreating figure of Seol-ha. His tone contains neither anger nor amusement, making his thoughts impossible to read. The identity of the man remains hidden for the moment, but judging from the unusual interest in his eyes, Seol-ha's reckless comments have clearly left a far greater impression on him than she could ever imagine. At that very moment, completely unaware that someone had overheard every word, Seol-ha continues walking away, believing that she has successfully resolved the troublesome situation. Little does she know that her declaration about hating handsome men and calling the second young master a disaster may end up creating an even bigger problem than the one she just escaped. The next scene begins with Seol-ha walking through the castle grounds while feeling mentally and physically exhausted. The earlier confrontation with the senior maids has finally ended, but instead of feeling relieved, she finds herself growing increasingly anxious. As she walks, she begins replaying the entire incident in her head. The more she thinks about it, the more she realizes that she may have done something incredibly foolish. She had spent nearly 5 years carefully avoiding attention, keeping her head down, and blending into the background. Her entire survival strategy revolved around remaining unnoticed. Yet somehow, on the very first day of becoming the second young master's dedicated maid, she managed to create a major commotion. The realization makes her groan internally. She reminds herself that her original goal was simply to survive until the end of her contract. For this reason, drawing attention to herself is the last thing she should be doing. What troubles her even more is where the incident occurred. The argument happened directly in front of Jeonnyeong Pavilion, the residence of Jeokgi-gyeon himself. As this thought enters her mind, a chill runs down her spine. She desperately tries to reassure herself. There is still a considerable distance between the front gate and the inner sections of the residence. Therefore, perhaps Jeokgi-gyeon never heard any of the shouting. Surely someone as important as the second young master would not be paying attention to a group of arguing maids. However, another part of her immediately counters that reasoning. After all, Jeok Yi-jeon is no ordinary person. In the original novel, he eventually becomes a monster who transcends the realm of ordinary humans. His martial abilities reach such terrifying heights that even the strongest experts fear him. Still, she quickly reminds herself that the story has not progressed that far yet. At the present time, Jeok Yi-jeon is merely 19 years old. For this reason, she convinces herself that she is probably worrying too much. After thinking it through for several moments, she clenches her fists and attempts to motivate herself. There is no point dwelling on mistakes that have already happened. Instead, she simply needs to perform her duties properly from this moment onward. If she remains calm, avoids attracting unnecessary attention, and continues behaving the same way she always has, everything should be fine. Eventually, she arrives in front of a large door. The moment she stops before it, her nervousness returns in full force. This is it. Beyond this single door lies the residence of Jeok Yi-jeon. Beyond this door begins the most dangerous part of her employment. As she stares at the entrance, she feels her heart beating uncontrollably inside her chest. Part of her desperately wants to finish her duties as quickly as possible and return home. However, another part of her knows that since this is her first official day as the dedicated maid, proper etiquette demands that she greet the master she will be serving. Gathering her courage, she slowly extends a trembling hand toward the door. Just as her fingers are about to make contact, the door suddenly opens from the opposite side. The unexpected movement startles her so badly that she nearly jumps. A young man steps out. The moment she sees his face, she freezes completely. For several seconds, her brain refuses to function. The man's appearance is so striking that it feels almost unreal. His handsome features seem almost sculpted rather than natural, and his calm demeanor gives him an air of quiet elegance. As Seol-ha stares at him, her eyes widen. Then another realization strikes her. This person cannot possibly be Cheong-gang. Her face immediately turns red. A mixture of nervousness and excitement overwhelms her. The young man standing before her is indeed Cheong-gang. The moment she recognizes him, countless memories from the novel flood into her mind. Cheong-gang is the successor of the magic sword Cheon family, one of the 6 great demonic families that support the demonic cult. Not only that, but he is also the only person in the entire story capable of genuinely calming down Jeok Yi-jeon whenever the latter loses control. In the future, Cheong-gang becomes famous throughout the martial world under the title Blood Sword Soul. His contributions play an enormous role in helping the future heavenly demon unify the martial world. Most importantly of all, he is Seol-ha's absolute favorite character in the entire novel. While many readers admire Jeok Yi-jeon, Seol-ha has always preferred Cheong-gang. As a result, seeing him in person feels almost like meeting a celebrity. The handsome young man studies her briefly before remarking that she has a face he has never seen before. He politely asks whether she is the newly assigned dedicated maid. Snapping out of her daze, Seol-ha hurriedly introduces herself. She explains that her name is Shin Seol-ha and that she has recently been assigned as the second young master's dedicated maid. Cheong-gang nods in understanding. He introduces himself and explains that he is responsible for guarding the second young master. He then states that he looks forward to working with her in the future. As he speaks, a bright and friendly smile appears on his face. The smile is devastatingly effective. Seol-ha feels as though her heart has just taken a direct hit. Her face grows even redder. For a moment, she struggles to remember how to speak properly. After managing to compose herself, she awkwardly agrees. Cheong-gang then explains that the young master is currently absent but will return shortly. Therefore, she is free to wait inside for the time being. Seol-ha quickly thanks him. After exchanging a few final words, Cheong-gang bids her farewell and closes the door behind her. Now alone inside the residence, Seol-ha finally takes a proper look around. To her surprise, the room feels far emptier than she expected. Considering that this is the residence of the heavenly demon's son, she had imagined something much grander. Instead, the room appears clean, elegant, and surprisingly simple. Her gaze eventually settles upon an aristocratic-looking bed. The sight immediately reminds her of another detail from the novel. Jeok Yi-jeon never allows anyone except himself to use his bed. His possessiveness regarding personal space is infamous. As a result, numerous women who attempted to sneak into his room and seduce him in hopes of gaining favor met terrible ends. According to the novel, many of them were killed before they could even utter a single excuse. Remembering those scenes causes Seol-ha to shiver. At the same time, she finds the situation somewhat ironic. As a maid, one of her responsibilities is naturally to tidy the bed, yet the owner of that bed is someone so obsessive that merely touching the wrong thing could potentially cost a person their life. As she continues cleaning, another thought enters her mind. Exactly how handsome is Gyeoki Jeon? She has always wondered about that. After all, countless women in the novel willingly risked their lives for a chance to get close to him. Even after witnessing others meet horrific fates, they continued trying. The author constantly describes him as a man more beautiful than any woman. Yet despite reading those descriptions countless times, Seol-ha has never truly been able to imagine such a face. A beauty worth risking one's life for? The concept feels impossible to visualize. Still pondering the question, she slowly turns around. The moment she does, her entire body freezes. Someone is standing behind her. A man. A very handsome man. An extraordinarily handsome man. For several seconds, her mind becomes completely blank. The face before her surpasses every description she remembers from the novel. His features are so flawless that they seem almost unreal. His cold gaze carries an overwhelming sense of authority, while his beauty possesses an almost frightening quality. At that moment, a single thought unconsciously enters her mind. If the face in front of her is the standard being discussed, then perhaps risking one's life might actually seem reasonable. Then reality catches up to her. The man's eyes narrow slightly as he looks at her with suspicion. Meanwhile, Seol-ha's face turns bright red, and her eyes widen to their limits. A terrible realization crashes into her mind. That is not Cheong-gang. This person standing directly in front of her is none other than Gyeoki Jeon himself. And somehow, without noticing his arrival, she has ended up staring directly at him. At that moment, standing face to face with one of the most dangerous characters in the entire novel, Seol-ha can only feel her heart sinking straight into the depths of despair. As Seol-ha finds herself standing face to face with Gyeoki Jeon, her mind immediately goes blank. For a brief moment, it genuinely feels as though time itself has stopped moving. The only thing she can see is the man standing before her. Her eyes widen as she unconsciously takes in every detail of his appearance. Even though she already knows from the novel that he is supposed to be extraordinarily handsome, witnessing it in person is an entirely different experience. The word handsome does not even feel sufficient anymore. Beautiful does not seem adequate either. No matter what description she tries to use, none of them seem capable of capturing what she is actually seeing. If not for the cold and terrifying glare currently directed at her, she honestly feels as though she could stare at his face forever without becoming bored. The dangerous thought immediately causes alarm bells to ring inside her head. Realizing what she is thinking, Seol-ha hurriedly shakes her head. She internally scolds herself, asking whether she has completely lost her mind. Stare forever? What kind of nonsense is that? She reminds herself that the person standing before her is not some harmless, handsome young master. He is Gyeoki Jeon, the future heavenly demon. The man who becomes infamous throughout the martial world as a bloodthirsty psychopath, capable of slaughtering countless people without hesitation. He is the same man who murders his own family members in the original story, and the same terrifying villain she has spent nearly 5 years trying to avoid. Remembering this finally restores a small amount of sanity to her thoughts. Forcing herself to focus, Seol-ha quickly bows and introduces herself. She politely greets him and states that her name is Shin Seol-ha, the newly assigned personal maid. Then, before her nervousness can worsen any further, she immediately announces that she will take her leave. Throughout the entire introduction, her voice remains noticeably tense. Meanwhile, Gyeoki Jeon simply stares at her with an unreadable expression. His eyes narrow slightly as though he is studying her. At the same time, he recalls the scene from earlier that day. From his position, he had observed the entire confrontation between Seol-ha and the senior maids. He clearly remembers how fearless and confident she appeared while verbally destroying her opponents. Yet the girl standing before him now looks completely different. Rather than appearing bold and sharp-tongued, she resembles a nervous squirrel that has accidentally wandered into a tiger's den. Watching her desperately avoid eye contact while her face gradually turns red, he finds the contrast oddly amusing. The moment Seol-ha finishes speaking, she turns around almost immediately. Without waiting for any further response, she practically flees from the room. Only after putting a considerable distance between herself and Jeonnyeong Pavilion does she finally allow herself to breathe properly. Her entire body trembles from the accumulated stress. Looking back toward the enormous residence, she cannot help complaining internally about its ridiculous size. She feels as though she spent the entire afternoon cleaning endless rooms and hallways. Even now, her legs are still sore from running around all day. Then another memory resurfaces. Earlier that morning, despite knowing exactly what kind of person Jae Ki-jeon truly is, she had almost been completely captivated by his appearance. The realization causes her even greater embarrassment. As she continues walking, she recalls all the times she read the novel in her previous life. Back then, she never understood why so many characters became fascinated by Jae Ki-jeon. Now, however, after seeing that face in person, she reluctantly admits that she finally understands. While she is still lost in thought, she suddenly notices movement nearby. Turning her head, she discovers Jae Ki-jeon training with his sword in an open area of the residence. The sight immediately captures her attention. His movements are incredibly smooth and powerful. Every swing of the blade carries overwhelming force. Then, with a sudden motion, he brings the sword crashing downward. The impact strikes the ground with such power that Seol-ha's eyes widen in shock. She can hardly believe what she is witnessing. According to her knowledge, he is not even utilizing internal energy at the moment. The terrifying display appears to be accomplished through pure physical strength alone. The realization leaves her speechless. After finishing the sequence, Jae Ki-jeon lowers his weapon. Sweat glistens across his body while he breathes heavily from the intense training. For a brief moment, Seol-ha simply watches him. There is an unusual softness in her gaze as she unconsciously admires the scene before her. Then, reality suddenly catches up with her. She gasps and immediately turns her head away. Once again, she scolds herself for forgetting who he is. This is not the time to stand around admiring handsome men. More importantly, evening is approaching. She still has responsibilities to complete. Realizing this, she quickly hurries away, while reminding herself that she needs to begin preparing dinner. As evening finally arrives, another scene unfolds inside Jeonnyeong Pavilion. Seol-ha approaches the entrance carrying a carefully prepared meal. Standing guard nearby is Cheong-gang. The moment he notices her, she greets him politely and explains that she has brought the young master's dinner. Cheong-gang smiles and informs her that the young master is already inside. Therefore, there is no need to wait outside, and she can simply enter directly. After thanking him, Seol-ha carefully carries the tray inside. The moment she enters the room, however, she nearly loses her composure again. Her eyes immediately land on Jae Ki-jeon. Judging by his appearance, he has only recently finished bathing. His damp black hair hangs loosely around his face, with small droplets of water still visible. The sight is unexpectedly destructive to her mental stability. Her face instantly begins turning red again. Trying her best not to stare, she quickly places the meal on the table. At the same time, she cannot help wondering why he failed to dry himself properly after leaving the bath. Meanwhile, Jae Ki-jeon shifts his attention toward the food she has prepared. Looking at the unfamiliar dish before him, he calmly asks what exactly it is. The question catches Seol-ha off guard. After briefly collecting her thoughts, she explains that it is a dish called chicken kalguksu. She further explains that chicken is slowly simmered to create a rich broth, while thin strands of dough made from flour are sliced and boiled within the soup. According to her explanation, the dish is highly nutritious and is often prepared as a meal intended to restore health and energy. The moment the explanation leaves her mouth, Seol-ha suddenly freezes. A realization strikes her like lightning. Now that she thinks about it, noodles are generally regarded as commoners, food in this world. Her eyes slowly widen as she remembers how her grandmother frequently prepared chicken kalguksu whenever she wanted to make something nourishing. Having eaten it for years, she unconsciously considered it a natural choice when preparing a health-boosting meal. For this reason, she never stopped to consider whether it was appropriate for someone of Jae Ki-jeon's status. Then, another memory surfaces. Earlier, when she requested ingredients for chicken kalguksu from the kitchen staff at Jamie Hall, several maids had looked at her with strange expressions. At the time, she had not understood why. Now she finally realizes the reason. The shocked reactions were not directed at her cooking skills. They were shocked that someone intended to serve a commoner's noodle dish to the son of the heavenly demon. As this horrifying realization settles in, Seol-ha slowly begins sweating. a feeling of impending doom creeps over her. Standing there while trying to maintain a calm expression, she suddenly wonders whether she has accidentally created yet another disaster on her very first day serving the second young master. After hearing Seol-ha's explanation regarding the chicken kalguksu, Jeok-Yi-jeon continues staring at the bowl for several moments. His expression remains unreadable, making it impossible for Seol-ha to determine what he is thinking. From her perspective, he appears somewhat skeptical. This reaction only makes her more nervous. After all, she has just realized that she accidentally served a commoner's noodle dish to the son of the heavenly demon. The more she thinks about it, the more convinced she becomes that she may have made yet another disastrous mistake. Standing quietly beside the table, she braces herself for criticism while desperately trying not to show her anxiety. Meanwhile, Jeok-Yi-jeon finally picks up his chopsticks. Without saying a word, he takes his first bite. The room immediately becomes silent. Seol-ha feels as though every second stretches into an eternity. Her entire future seems to depend on his reaction. She carefully watches his face while preparing herself for the worst possible outcome. To her surprise, Jeok-Yi-jeon calmly places his chopsticks down after tasting the dish. Then, in a completely matter-of-fact tone, he remarks that it is good. He further comments that the meal feels far more filling than the dishes usually served to him. The words hit Seol-ha like a bolt of lightning. For a moment, she simply stares at him. Then her eyes widen in disbelief. A huge wave of relief washes over her entire body. She feels as though she has narrowly escaped death yet again. Unable to hide her happiness, a bright smile immediately appears on her face. Internally, she repeatedly thanks every deity she can think of. After collecting herself, she politely asks whether he would like additional noodles if the current portion is not enough. Although the conversation remains brief, Seol-ha feels as though she has successfully completed her first major mission as the second young master's dedicated maid. The scene later shifts to outside the residence, where Seol-ha is speaking with Cheong-gang. The guard appears amused as he shares some unexpected news. According to him, it seems the young master truly enjoyed the meal she prepared. Not only did he finish every last bite, but he even requested another serving afterward. The revelation leaves Seol-ha stunned. She had expected him to eat well due to his intense martial training, but she never imagined he would ask for seconds. Curious, she remarks that she thought the young master always ate large quantities of food. However, Cheong-gang quickly shakes his head. He explains that the opposite is actually true. In recent years, one of the biggest concerns among those serving Jeok-Yi-jeon has been his tendency to skip meals entirely. Sometimes he becomes so absorbed in training or other matters that he ignores food altogether. Hearing this surprises Seol-ha even further. Cheong-gang smiles warmly and remarks that the young master certainly seems to have possessed quite an appetite today. While listening, Seol-ha suddenly notices something else. Throughout the entire day, she has never actually seen Cheong-gang eating. The realization causes her to tilt her head curiously. She asks whether he has eaten anything at all. Thinking back carefully, she recalls not seeing him during breakfast or lunch either. Therefore, she wonders whether he is hungry. Cheong-gang immediately dismisses her concern. He politely tells her not to worry about his meals. According to him, she is the young master's maid. For this reason, her attention should remain focused solely on serving Jeok-Yi-jeon. However, Seol-ha refuses to accept that answer. She points out that people need food in order to work properly. No matter how skilled someone may be, functioning on an empty stomach is never a good idea. As she speaks, she reaches into her belongings and pulls out several rice balls. Holding them out toward him, she explains that she received them from a friend working at Jamie Hall. Since she already has food of her own, she asks him to accept them. Cheong-gang appears slightly troubled. He explains that he is genuinely fine and questions how he could possibly take food that was given specifically to her by a friend. Seeing him continue refusing, Seol-ha simply smiles and winks. She insists that he stop worrying. She already has her own portion. Therefore, there is absolutely no problem. Furthermore, she points out that continuously holding her hand out like this is becoming rather awkward. While speaking casually on the outside, her thoughts are completely different. Inside her head, she is practically begging him to accept the offering. After all, this is her favorite character from the entire novel. From her perspective, this feels like a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity. Deep inside, she thinks that he must understand this older sister's overwhelming desire to feed delicious food to her favorite character. Completely unaware of the strange thoughts running through her mind, Chianggang stares at her for a few moments. He appears slightly confused by her enthusiastic reaction. Eventually, however, he reaches out and accepts the rice ball. Then, with a gentle smile, he thanks her and says he will enjoy it. The moment he accepts the food, Seol-ha's expression immediately brightens. She looks absurdly satisfied with herself. After exchanging a few more words, she cheerfully waves goodbye and announces that she will be leaving now. Chianggang returns the farewell while watching her depart. As Seol-ha walks away, she cannot help smiling to herself. In her previous life, she never imagined she would experience the joy of personally offering food to her favorite fictional character. The entire situation feels strangely rewarding. Unfortunately, her good mood does not last very long. The moment she enters Jeok-Jeon's room again, she immediately notices something unusual. The young master is standing there with his arms folded. His posture is rigid. His expression is cold. Most importantly, he looks angry. The instant Seol-ha notices this, the smile disappears from her face. A feeling of dread immediately settles into her stomach. Her mind begins racing through every possible mistake she might have made. Did she prepare the wrong meal? Did she accidentally violate some rule? Did she offend him without realizing it? The more possibilities she considers, the more nervous she becomes. However, Jeok-Jeon says absolutely nothing. He simply stares at her for a moment. Then he turns around. Without offering any explanation whatsoever, he begins walking away. Watching him leave, Seol-ha slowly releases a breath she did not realize she had been holding. At least she is not being punished. That alone feels like a victory. Still, the strange atmosphere continues bothering her. For a brief moment earlier, she had started believing that perhaps the meal had softened his attitude slightly. Now she realizes that thought was nothing more than wishful thinking. Internally, she criticizes herself for becoming complacent. What kind of person is Jeok-Jeon? He is not some ordinary young master who can be won over with a bowl of noodles. He is the future heavenly demon, a terrifying individual whose name eventually shakes the entire martial world. There is absolutely no way someone like him would become gentle or approachable simply because he enjoyed a meal. As she watches his retreating figure disappear deeper into the residence, Seol-ha quietly reminds herself of an important rule. From this moment onward, she must remain alert every second, every minute, and every single day. If she wishes to survive until the end of her contract, she cannot allow herself to lower her guard even once around Jeok-Jeon. Even the smallest mistake could prove fatal. For this reason, she silently resolves to be more careful than ever as her unpredictable life within Jeonnyeong Pavilion continues. As the story continues, Seol-ha reflects on everything that has happened over the past several days. Despite constantly worrying that she had already gotten on Jeok-Jeon's bad side, nothing she feared actually comes to pass. Jeok-Jeon continues behaving as he normally does, and from everything she observes, he does not appear to have any intention of harming her. In fact, something entirely unexpected begins happening. His appetite suddenly starts increasing. Rather than eating the usual meals prepared by the kitchen, he begins requesting all kinds of different dishes from Seol-ha. Every time she believes she has finished her work for the day, another request arrives from Jeonnyeong Pavilion. For this reason, she ends up traveling back and forth between Jeonnyeong Pavilion and Jami Pavilion several times every single day. Before she realizes it, her once predictable routine transforms into an exhausting schedule that barely leaves her a moment to rest. One particularly busy day, Seol-ha arrives at Jami Pavilion looking completely exhausted after delivering yet another meal. However, the moment she steps inside, she immediately notices that the atmosphere feels completely different from usual. Instead of the orderly kitchen she is accustomed to, the entire pavilion has descended into absolute chaos. The maids are running around in every direction while loudly talking over one another. Some are borrowing ribbons, while others argue over accessories and cosmetics. One maid loudly snatches a decorative hairpin from another and insists that it would look much better on her anyway. Everywhere Seol-ha looks, young women are fussing over their appearances, as though some grand celebration is about to begin. Confused by the unexpected commotion, Seol-ha watches everything unfold until So-ok notices her arrival and quickly walks over. Smiling excitedly, So-ok explains that everyone has been saying the most handsome man in the entire demonic cult has finally started taking an interest in Jami Pavilion. For this reason, all of the maids have become unbelievably excited. Every single one of them is dressing up as beautifully as possible in hopes of catching his attention if they happen to cross paths with him. Looking around at the ridiculous spectacle, Seol-ha can only give an awkward smile before quietly agreeing that she can certainly tell. After a brief pause, So-ok hesitantly admits that she had actually been worried when she first heard Seol-ha had become the second young master's personal maid. She explains that Seol-ha always used to go out of her way to avoid the second young master whenever possible. Therefore, hearing that she had suddenly become his dedicated maid came as a huge surprise. Hearing those words leaves Seol-ha momentarily stunned. She asks in confusion whether So-ok actually noticed something like that. Smiling knowingly, So-ok asks how she could possibly have missed it. According to her, Seol-ha intentionally switched work shifts several times just to avoid entering Jeonnyeong Pavilion. It had been so obvious that anyone paying attention could have figured it out. However, seeing that everything seems to be going smoothly now comes as a great relief. Furthermore, ever since Seol-ha became the second young master's maid, all kinds of interesting things have started happening around the castle. As soon as she finishes speaking, So-ok suddenly lowers her voice and leans in closer with an excited smile. She shyly asks whether Seol-ha has figured out the secret to winning the second young master's favor. If she has, she hopes Seol-ha will secretly share that secret with her as a friend. The ridiculous question causes Seol-ha to stare blankly for a moment. Then, unable to believe what she just heard, she reaches over and pinches So-ok's nose before loudly asking whether this is really the time to be talking about something so absurd. Rather than becoming offended, So-ok simply laughs and replies that this is exactly what friends are for. Unfortunately, their conversation immediately attracts everyone else's attention. The surrounding maids suddenly gather around Seol-ha with sparkling eyes. One after another, they all begin asking the exact same question about how to win the second young master's favor. The overwhelming barrage of questions leaves Seol-ha completely flustered. Becoming even more frustrated, she loudly insists that she genuinely does not know anything about that. Her desperate scream echoes throughout the entire castle, causing countless people nearby to glance toward Jamie Pavilion in confusion. After finally escaping the relentless questioning, Seol-ha slowly walks outside while letting out an exhausted sigh. She mutters to herself that Jeok Yi-jeon's popularity is truly unbelievable. As she continues walking, she reflects on how she originally planned to spend the remaining months quietly staying out of everyone's sight until the day her contract expired. Instead, she somehow ends up attracting more attention than ever before. The situation fills her with an uneasy feeling. Deep inside, she cannot shake the sense that something troublesome is waiting just around the corner. Even so, she quickly forces herself to think positively. There are only 2 months remaining before her contract ends. If she can simply endure everything until then, everything should work out. She firmly tells herself that today's commotion is merely a harmless fuss among the maids and nothing more. Just as she is trying to calm herself down, someone suddenly calls out to her. Turning around, she sees one of the senior maids from the earlier confrontation standing behind her. The woman's expression is unusually calm compared to before. Without wasting any time, she informs Seol-ha that she has been assigned to prepare the second young master's bathwater that day. The announcement immediately confuses Seol-ha. She points out that nothing about preparing bathwater was mentioned in the instruction manual Madame Gwak personally gave her. The senior maid immediately insists that this task came directly from the second young master himself. According to her, the responsibility of drawing bathwater normally rotates among the maids anyway. Another maid standing beside her quickly nods in agreement and explains that they had intended to tell Seol-ha about the duty on her very first day. Unfortunately, so many unexpected incidents happened afterward that they never had the opportunity. The obvious implication is the fight that broke out between Seol-ha and the senior maids shortly after her arrival. Although Seol-ha still feels slightly suspicious, she ultimately decides there is no reason to argue. Calmly accepting their explanation, she tells them that she will take their word for it and handle the task herself. The senior maids smile pleasantly and tell her to keep up the good work before casually saying goodbye as they begin leaving for the day. Seol-ha politely returns the farewell while watching them disappear down the corridor. The moment they are completely out of sight, however, she cannot help complaining to herself. While everyone else gets to clock out early and head home, she is the only one being left behind with extra work. She had desperately wanted to finish her shift early as well. Meanwhile, As Seo-ha heads toward the bathhouse to prepare the water exactly as instructed, the perspective shifts back to the departing senior maid. The pleasant smile that had been on her face moments earlier slowly twists into a sly, malicious grin. It becomes painfully obvious that her kindness was nothing more than an act, and judging from the expression now spreading across her face, she has already prepared another scheme with Seo-ha as its intended victim. After arriving at the bathhouse, Seo-ha carefully checks the water one last time before quietly nodding to herself. She remarks that she is glad the temperature is perfect for a half bath before Jeok Yi-jeon arrives. As she continues making the final preparations, another thought crosses her mind. This is the very first time she will be attending to the second young master by herself since becoming his personal maid. For this reason, she cannot help feeling slightly nervous. Even so, she quickly attempts to reassure herself. There is no reason to panic. It is not as though Jeok Yi-jeon is suddenly going to strike her down with a single blow the moment she enters his sight. Repeating those words in her mind, she tries to calm her racing heart and focus on finishing her work. Just then, the bathhouse door slowly slides open behind her. The sound immediately catches her attention. She quickly turns around to see who has entered, and the moment her eyes meet the figure standing in the doorway, she nearly jumps in surprise. It is none other than the second young master himself. Acting almost entirely on instinct, Seo-ha hurriedly slips behind the folding screen positioned nearby, hiding herself before he can notice her flustered expression. Meanwhile, Jeok Yi-jeon calmly walks toward the bath without showing any sign of surprise. With practiced movements, he removes his outer robe before stepping toward the steaming water. Hidden behind the screen, Seo-ha remains perfectly still, hardly daring to breathe, as anxiety slowly begins building inside her chest. As Jeok Yi-jeon settles into the bath, he suddenly breaks the silence by asking whether the new maid is the one responsible for preparing the bathwater today. Startled by the unexpected question, Seo-ha immediately answers from behind the screen. She confirms that she is indeed the one in charge before nervously asking whether there is any problem with the bath. After briefly testing the water, Jeok Yi-jeon calmly remarks that today's water is warmer than usual. Hearing those words causes Seo-ha's heart to sink. She hurriedly asks whether the water is perhaps too hot. However, to her surprise, he simply replies that it is not. In fact, he quietly admits that he actually prefers this temperature. His answer catches Seo-ha completely off guard. Meanwhile, Jeok Yi-jeon sinks slightly deeper into the bath as another thought quietly crosses his mind. Normally, he dislikes even the smallest change to his daily routine. Any difference from what he considers normal usually irritates him. Yet for some strange reason, today's change does not bother him at all. Instead, he finds it surprisingly comfortable. The realization leaves even him wondering why he feels this way. While quietly reflecting, his thoughts naturally drift towards Seo-ha. He recalls how awkwardly she always behaves whenever she is around him. Every encounter is filled with nervous apologies. Sometimes she apologizes merely for entering the room. Other times she apologizes simply for stepping across his shadow. Every time she looks at him, she appears utterly terrified, as though expecting him to kill her at any moment. Despite acting so frightened, she somehow continues doing thoughtful things for him without ever drawing attention to herself. He remembers the unusual chicken kalguksu she prepared for him, a meal that unexpectedly suited his tastes. He also recalls discovering that his blankets had been carefully dried beneath the warm sunlight, so they would be more comfortable when he slept. Even the gentle smiles she occasionally gives him seem entirely natural rather than forced. As these memories continue surfacing, another realization suddenly occurs to him. His thoughts shift toward Changgang. He begins wondering whether Seo-ha behaves kindly only toward him, or whether she treats everyone around her the same way. The image of her smiling brightly while speaking with Changgang unexpectedly appears in his mind. For some reason, the memory lingers longer than he expects. Finally deciding to satisfy his curiosity, Jeok Yi-jeon calls out from inside the bath and tells Seo-ha to come closer. He says that there is something he wishes to ask her. Hearing the order, Seo-ha immediately becomes confused. Nevertheless, she slowly steps out from behind the folding screen and carefully approaches the bath while keeping her eyes respectfully lowered. Once she reaches an appropriate distance, she politely asks what he requires of her. Jeok Yi-jeon immediately asks about something that happened a few days earlier. He asks what exactly it was that she gave. The vague question leaves Seo-ha completely puzzled. She instinctively asks who he is referring to. Without changing his expression, Jiao Qigong clarifies that he is talking about Chianggang, not himself. Only then does Seolha finally understand. However, the moment she raises her head to answer, her eyes accidentally meet Jiao Qigong's. Sitting inside the warm bath, with damp hair framing his face and steam rising around him, he somehow appears even more striking than usual. The unexpected sight immediately causes Seolha's cheeks to flush bright red. Realizing what she is doing, she quickly lowers her head again, before hurriedly explaining that she has never given the young master anything personally. Jiao Qigong calmly repeats that he is referring to Chianggang. After hearing the clarification, Seolha finally remembers. She explains that she gave Sir Chianggang several rice balls. Earlier that day, it seemed as though he had skipped another meal, so she simply wanted him to eat something. From her perspective, there was nothing particularly unusual about the situation. After listening quietly, Jiao Qigong softly repeats the words to himself, rice balls. Then, almost as though thinking aloud, he remarks that she gave them to Chianggang instead of giving them to him. The strange comment immediately causes Seolha's expression to stiffen. She has absolutely no idea what he means by those words. As confusion begins filling her mind, another memory from the original novel suddenly resurfaces. She vividly remembers that this exact pattern appears many times throughout the story. Whenever Jiao Qigong quietly mutters to himself in that calm, emotionless manner, it almost always signals the beginning of someone's ruthless punishment. The realization sends an icy chill running down her spine. Her body immediately begins trembling uncontrollably. Countless terrifying possibilities flash through her mind one after another. Surely he cannot possibly be planning to kill her over something as insignificant as giving Chianggang a few rice balls. Yet the more she remembers the novel, the less impossible that idea seems. Within seconds, her imagination completely spirals out of control. In her mind, she pictures Jiao Qigong suddenly grabbing her by the chin with an icy expression before coldly sentencing her to death over such a trivial matter. The imaginary scene feels so vivid that Seolha nearly convinces herself it is about to become reality. Standing before the bath while desperately trying to hide her fear, she silently prays that she has not accidentally offended the future heavenly demon over something as unbelievably pointless as a few homemade rice balls. The moment Jiao Qigong's strange remark finishes echoing through the bathhouse, Seolha's imagination completely runs wild. Without wasting even a second, she immediately drops to her knees and presses herself against the floor in a deep bow. In a panicked voice, she desperately begs him to spare her life. She admits that the servant has been foolish and has completely failed to understand the young master's intentions. While apologizing repeatedly, countless thoughts race through her mind. She reminds herself that she only has a few more months left before her contract finally ends. If she can simply survive until then, everything will be over. She silently pleads with herself not to die here after enduring nearly 5 years inside this terrifying place. There is absolutely no way she can be killed over something as ridiculous as a few rice balls. Watching the trembling maid before him, Jiao Qigong cannot hide his confusion. He calmly asks whether she is talking to him before questioning when he ever said he intended to kill her. He then points out that she seems to fear him far more than necessary. With genuine curiosity, he wonders whether some strange rumor has spread throughout the castle, claiming that he devours maids or something equally absurd. Hearing those unexpected words, Seolha hurriedly raises her head just enough to answer. She immediately denies such a thing and insists that she has only ever heard countless praises regarding young Master Li's noble character. She even declares that she deserves death merely for daring to upset someone as honorable as him. Even so, she desperately begs him to allow her one opportunity to explain herself before passing judgment. Jiao Qigong quietly replies with a simple hum, silently signaling her to continue. Meanwhile, his eyes remain fixed on the frightened girl kneeling before him. Her entire body is trembling so badly that it almost seems as though she might collapse at any moment. Looking at his expression, Seolha cannot help grumbling inwardly. She begins wondering whether this bastard is actually enjoying watching her panic, while she is internally experiencing the greatest crisis of her life. Trying her best to remain composed, Seolha hurriedly explains that the rice balls she gave Chianggang are nothing special at all. According to her, they are simply made by roughly mixing together leftover rice with various leftover side dishes. Such humble food is completely unworthy of someone as noble as the second young master. For this reason, the thought of serving something so ordinary to him never even crossed her mind. However, she quickly adds that if he is merely curious about their taste, she can prepare a fresh batch using proper ingredients and personally serve them as a late-night snack. A faint smile slowly appears on Gyeokgi-jeon's face. He simply asks whether she truly can. Seol-ha immediately nods and replies that she certainly can. Satisfied with the answer, Gyeokgi-jeon calmly tells her to do exactly that. Hearing those words, Seol-ha almost feels like crying from relief. She quickly bows once more before respectfully announcing that this servant will excuse herself to prepare the late-night meal immediately. As she hurriedly leaves the bathhouse, Gyeokgi-jeon quietly watches her retreating figure. A small smirk gradually forms across his lips as he silently concludes that, just as he expected, she truly does seem interesting. The moment Seol-ha steps outside the bathhouse, she finally lets out the breath she has been holding. She cannot help complaining to herself that if he wanted rice balls so badly, he could have simply asked directly instead of speaking in such an unbelievably confusing manner. His strange way of talking nearly causes her heart to shrivel from fear. As she continues walking, she silently promises herself that once she finally escapes the demonic cult, together with her grandmother, the very first thing she will do is tell her grandmother every terrifying story about surviving under the second young master's service. Just as she is finally beginning to relax, someone suddenly calls her name from nearby. Startled, Seol-ha immediately looks around to locate the voice. Peeking from behind a nearby wall is another maid. Looking more carefully, Seol-ha recognizes her as Senior Gae. The older maid immediately places a finger against her lips, signaling for silence before motioning for Seol-ha to come closer. Although Seol-ha recognizes her name, they have never been particularly close. She simply knows that Gae is one of the third-year senior maids serving inside the castle. Curious about the unexpected meeting, Seol-ha walks over before politely asking what brings her here. Gae simply smiles warmly and replies that she came to congratulate her. The unexpected answer leaves Seol-ha completely confused, so she asks what exactly there is to congratulate her for. Gae cheerfully explains that it has now been exactly 1 week since Seol-ha became young Master Li's personal maid. According to tradition among the castle maids, whenever someone successfully settles into a new position without any major problems, they hold a small celebration together. Although the explanation sounds reasonable, Seol-ha still hesitates. She gently points out that she is technically not supposed to leave her post. Even though she genuinely appreciates everyone's kindness, she cannot simply disappear while serving the second young master. Before she can finish speaking, however, Gae suddenly grabs her hand. Laughing softly, Gae assures her that none of them would recklessly drag her away without first understanding the young master's routine. She explains that after finishing his bath, young Master Li usually spends quite a while reading alone. Therefore, there is no reason to worry. Everything has already been taken into consideration. Smiling brightly, she tells Seol-ha to stop overthinking everything and simply come along, since everyone else is already waiting. Still feeling somewhat uncertain, Seol-ha allows herself to be led away. After walking for some time, the surroundings gradually become quieter. The lively atmosphere of the castle slowly disappears behind them. Instead of approaching a place suitable for a cheerful gathering, they continue moving toward an increasingly isolated corner of the estate. With every passing step, Seol-ha's uneasiness continues growing stronger. She quietly wonders whether it is just her imagination. But this celebration somehow feels stranger and stranger. If this is truly supposed to be a small party, why do they keep walking toward a place that feels more deserted and unsettling with every step? Finally, Gae stops walking. She smiles ahead before announcing that they have arrived. The moment Seol-ha lifts her eyes, she immediately notices someone already waiting there. Sitting casually on a large tree stump is the very same senior maid who confronted and insulted her earlier. A smug smile spreads across the woman's face as she looks directly at Seol-ha. She calmly remarks that she told Seol-ha they would be seeing each other again later. The moment those words reach her ears, Seol-ha instantly realizes everything. She silently recalls the suspicious farewell the senior maid gave her earlier that day. At the time, something about those words had felt strangely unnatural. Now she finally understands why. There was never any celebration planned from the beginning. This entire gathering has been nothing more than a carefully prepared trap waiting specifically for her. The atmosphere turns even more hostile as another maid standing beside the senior steps forward with an irritated expression. Looking directly at Seol-ha, she asks whether this idiot has completely lost her mind. The woman then rises from the tree log where she has been sitting and slowly approaches her. With an arrogant look, she demands to know why Seol-ha failed to greet her seniors the moment she arrived. According to her, seniors stand above juniors just as the heavens stand above the earth, so showing respect should have been the first thing Seol-ha did. She even questions whether Seol-ha's eyes have become useless if she cannot recognize people of higher status. Before the tension escalates any further, Gae lightly laughs and tells Jia not to frighten Seol-ha too much. However, the words that follow reveal that she has no intention of helping. She mockingly remarks that Seol-ha merely became arrogant after being born with a somewhat decent-looking face. Even then, she is still nothing more than a pitiful girl who failed to capture even a little of young Master Li's attention. The moment those words are spoken, the surrounding maids burst into laughter together, treating Seol-ha like the punchline of a joke. Listening to their mocking voices, Seol-ha quietly pieces everything together. Earlier, she genuinely wonders whether she had unknowingly offended these senior maids in some way. However, after hearing their conversation, the truth becomes painfully obvious. They never hated her because of anything she actually did. The real reason is simply that she became Gyeok Gi-yeon's personal maid while they remained ordinary castle maids. Their jealousy has been festering ever since that appointment. Meanwhile, Jia slowly walks towards Seol-ha with an intimidating expression. As she presses a finger firmly against Seol-ha's chest, she reminds her that the maids have their own hierarchy and rules that everyone must follow. Even if Seol-ha has become the second young master's personal maid, she still has no right to lay a hand on a senior. Unable to stay silent any longer, Seol-ha immediately points out that they were the ones who attacked first. Unfortunately, the explanation only angers Jia even more. Without another word, Jia suddenly swings her hand towards Seol-ha's face, clearly intending to slap her. However, Seol-ha reacts almost instantly and steps aside before the strike can land. Watching her attack miss completely, Seol-ha cannot help thinking that the woman truly tried to hit her first, despite accusing her of disrespect. Jia's expression twists with fury, as she declares that Seol-ha can forget pretending to be the victim. Originally, she only intended to end this with a single slap. However, now she has completely changed her mind. Today, Seol-ha is going to receive a proper beating. Saying that, Jia immediately rushes toward her again. Watching her movements carefully, Seol-ha suddenly realizes why the senior maids have been so confident, despite previously losing to her. This time, they intentionally brought along someone with actual martial arts training. Judging from Jia's footwork and stance, she is clearly far more skilled than the others. Even so, Jia's repeated attacks continue missing their target. Every strike she throws is narrowly avoided as Seol-ha skillfully slips away at the last possible moment. While desperately dodging, Seol-ha begins wondering how long she can keep this up. At the same time, Jia becomes increasingly frustrated. She angrily shouts, demanding to know how long Seol-ha intends to keep running away like an idiot. With that, Jia gathers all her strength into one powerful strike and lunges forward at full speed. This time, however, Seol-ha decides not to dodge. Instead, she clenches her fist tightly. As determination fills her eyes, she silently reminds herself that Madame Shinjiam certainly did not raise her poorly. The countless lessons and harsh training her grandmother forced upon her suddenly flash through her mind. Trusting those teachings, Seol-ha drives her fist straight forward with every ounce of strength she possesses. The punch lands squarely across Jia's face with tremendous force. Her hair flies wildly through the air as her entire body is sent backward before collapsing onto the ground. The surrounding senior maids immediately scream Jia's name in complete panic as they rush toward her. Meanwhile, Seol-ha calmly looks down at the unconscious woman before quietly remarking that the blow probably hurts quite a bit. However, she deliberately held back enough to merely knock Jia unconscious. Her life is not in danger at all. Before anyone has the opportunity to react further, an entirely unexpected incident unfolds nearby. From behind the surrounding trees, two unfamiliar men suddenly come running into the area at full speed. The sudden appearance of complete strangers instantly leaves Seol-ha confused. Before she can even process the situation, one of the men rushes directly toward her and violently wraps an arm around her neck from behind. In one swift movement, He pulls her against his body while pressing a sharp knife tightly against her throat. Shouting toward the people pursuing him, the man demands that everyone stay back, otherwise he threatens to kill the girl immediately. Hearing those words, Seolha's mind goes completely blank. At first she wonders whether this man is simply running away from someone chasing him. Then, unable to contain herself any longer, she mentally shouts in complete disbelief, wondering what on earth is happening. Even amid the chaos, another thought immediately enters her mind. She cannot understand why this man would choose someone like her as a hostage. Of all the people present, he somehow grabs an insignificant maid. She silently questions whether he is an idiot. What exactly does he expect to accomplish by threatening someone whose life seemingly holds almost no value within the demonic cult? As these thoughts race through her head, she notices two more armed men steadily approaching from the opposite direction. Judging by their expressions, none of them appear remotely concerned about her safety. Instead, they continue advancing without hesitation, paying attention only to the fugitive holding her hostage. With every passing second, the distance between both sides grows smaller. Feeling cornered, the man gripping Seolha presses the knife even harder against her neck. The cold blade begins cutting into her skin, just enough to draw a thin line of blood. The sharp sting immediately sends a wave of fear through her entire body. Looking around, Seolha suddenly realizes that 5 armed men now surround her, while one of them still holds her tightly in place. At that moment, the horrifying reality finally sinks in. This is no longer some ordinary argument between maids. She has somehow become trapped in an extremely dangerous situation. As the night grows darker, the moon rises higher into the sky, and a cool breeze quietly sweeps through the forest, causing the surrounding trees to rustle softly. In the middle of that tense atmosphere, Seolha remains trapped in the arms of the masked man holding her hostage. The cold blade continues pressing against her neck, and every passing second feels like an eternity. Countless thoughts race through her terrified mind. She instinctively thinks of her grandmother and silently wonders what she should do now. Desperation slowly overwhelms her as she silently pleads for someone, anyone at all, to save her. Although she desperately wants to resist, the knife pressed against her throat prevents her from making even the slightest reckless movement. Fear gradually fills her heart as tears begin forming in her eyes. Just as the standoff reaches its peak, an intense flash of crimson light suddenly tears through the darkness. The brilliant red streak crashes into the ground with explosive force, instantly startling everyone present. Before anyone can even comprehend what has happened, another crimson flash descends from above, followed by another and another. The attacks continue raining down with incredible speed, forcing the surrounding men into complete panic. One of the blazing attacks strikes the man holding Seolha hostage directly. The tremendous impact instantly throws him backward, before he crashes heavily onto the ground. His grip loosens immediately, allowing Seolha to stumble free in complete confusion. She can only stare blankly at the scene while trying to understand what just happened. Almost immediately, a familiar martial technique comes to mind. She realizes that the attack she just witnessed is the shattered jade bullet technique. According to everything she knows, it is an advanced ascension technique that only the strongest elites of the demonic cult are capable of performing. It is certainly not a martial art that an ordinary expert could ever hope to master. Shocked by the realization, she instinctively looks upward, wondering who could possibly possess such overwhelming skill. The answer leaves her completely speechless. Standing high above, under the pale moonlight, is none other than Jeokyi-gyeon himself. The silver light of the moon illuminates his face, making his already extraordinary appearance seem almost unreal. For a brief moment, Seolha simply stares at him in disbelief. The image before her feels strangely surreal. This is the same young man she has grown accustomed to seeing quietly, reading books after finishing his evening bath. Yet the person standing before her now radiates an entirely different presence. He no longer resembles a quiet nobleman. Instead, he appears every bit like the terrifying future heavenly demon she remembers from the novel. Without saying a single, unnecessary word, Jeokyi-gyeon calmly descends to the ground and walks directly toward Seolha. She continues watching him with wide eyes, unable to predict what he intends to do. Then, without any warning whatsoever, he suddenly reaches forward and gently grabs her chin. The unexpected action completely catches Seolha off guard. Her mind immediately fills with confusion as she wonders why he suddenly grabbed her chin out of nowhere. However, Jeokyi-gyeon pays no attention to her bewildered expression. His eyes quietly examine the thin cut left across her neck by the knife. After silently inspecting the injury, He lets out a faint sigh before releasing her. The very next moment, his attention shifts back toward the enemies lying nearby. Without the slightest hesitation, he raises his hand once again. Brilliant crimson light immediately gathers around his fingertips before another shattered jade bullet technique erupts across the battlefield. The attacks strike the remaining enemies with terrifying precision. Watching the overwhelming destructive force unfold before her eyes, Seol-ha cannot help trembling. She realizes that if anyone were struck directly by that technique, their body would quite literally be blown apart. The sheer power of the attack leaves her frozen in fear. For the first time since arriving in this world, she truly witnesses the horrifying combat ability of Jeok Yi-jeon with her own eyes. At that moment, she genuinely believes she is about to watch someone die right in front of her. Just before another fatal attack can land, a powerful voice suddenly echoes throughout the area. The voice commands everyone to stop. Both Seol-ha and Jeok Yi-jeon instinctively turn toward the source of the interruption. The surviving men who had been fighting moments earlier immediately collapse onto the ground and begin desperately begging for their lives. Seol-ha also hurriedly lowers herself to the ground in a respectful bow without even thinking. As she slowly raises her eyes, she notices an elderly man calmly approaching the scene. The moment she recognizes who he is, another wave of shock washes over her. Standing before everyone is one of the 10 great masters of Muram, a legendary martial artist regarded as the strongest living expert in the martial world. He is none other than the heavenly demon himself. Unable to believe what she is witnessing, Seol-ha silently wonders why someone of the heavenly demon's status would personally appear here over such an incident. Meanwhile, everyone present respectfully bows their heads and greets him with the utmost reverence. The heavenly demon slowly walks forward, before casually remarking that it has been quite some time since they last met. One of the men standing nearby respectfully addresses Jeok Yi-jeon as the young master. The heavenly demon then studies Jeok Yi-jeon for a brief moment before commenting that he has become far more handsome than the last time they met. Jeok Yi-jeon shows almost no reaction to the compliment. Maintaining his usual calm expression, he bluntly replies that the heavenly demon undoubtedly receives daily reports regarding him anyway. For that reason, there is no need to waste time exchanging meaningless pleasantries. Instead, he requests that they move directly to the real purpose of this visit. Standing nearby is the master of Guihon Pavilion, a man named Gong Peicheon, who silently observes the conversation as the tense atmosphere continues lingering beneath the moonlit sky. As Seol-ha quietly listens to the conversation unfolding before her, she finally realizes the identity of the scholarly-looking man standing beside the heavenly demon. So he is the master of Guihon Pavilion, the demonic cult's military strategist. Looking at him more carefully, she cannot help thinking that he resembles a refined scholar far more than a martial artist. His calm demeanor, neat appearance, and composed expression make him look like someone who belongs behind stacks of ancient books, rather than on a battlefield stained with blood. It is difficult to believe that someone who appears so gentle is actually one of the highest-ranking figures within the demonic cult. The heavenly demon slowly points toward the spy, who had been struck down moments earlier by Jeok Yi-jeon's shattered jade bullet technique. In a calm yet authoritative voice, he asks who the man is and why he was being pursued in the middle of the castle grounds. Gong Peicheon respectfully explains that the man is a spy sent by Muram. According to him, the infiltrator spent the last 5 years disguising himself as a member of the Blood Shadow Hunt. Unfortunately for the spy, his true identity was exposed only a few days earlier. Gond further explains that he originally intended to capture the man alive and extract valuable information from him. However, the spy realized that his cover had been blown and immediately fled, which ultimately caused the disturbance that spread throughout the castle. After hearing the explanation, Jeok Yi-jeon calmly remarks that he has always heard Guihon Pavilion thoroughly investigates every individual before accepting them into its ranks. His words are not particularly harsh, yet the implication behind them is obvious. Gong Peicheon immediately lowers his head and accepts responsibility, admitting that, as the pavilion master, the fault lies entirely with him. However, instead of dwelling on the mistake, he politely asks what brought the second young master to that area at such a late hour. He also points out that Jeok Yi-jeon personally intervened and even executed one of the fugitives himself, something that rarely happens without reason. Jeok Yi-jeon's expression remains completely unchanged as he gives a simple answer. He states that he stepped in because it appeared that his maid was in danger. Gon Peixian looks genuinely surprised by the unexpected explanation. Even the heavenly demon raises an eyebrow with faint curiosity. Gond asks whether the second young master is truly saying that he personally intervened for the sake of a mere maid. Jeok Yi-gyeon simply gestures towards Seol-ha and calmly explains that when he arrived after hearing the commotion, the fleeing spy had already taken his maid hostage. Standing nearby, Seol-ha feels as though she has completely misheard the conversation. Her eyes widen in disbelief as she silently repeats his words in her mind. Did she hear that correctly? Jeok Yi-gyeon actually comes here to save her. The realization leaves her completely speechless. Throughout all the years she has spent fearing him, she never once imagines that he would intervene to protect her life. Unfortunately, before she can process everything, the heavenly demon's attention shifts toward her. The moment his eyes fall upon her, Seol-ha instinctively prays in her heart that he will simply ignore her existence. Instead, he calmly orders her to stand up and look him directly in the eyes. Knowing she has absolutely no choice, Seol-ha suppresses her nervousness and respectfully answers that she understands. She slowly rises to her feet and carefully lifts her head. Despite her efforts to remain composed, the innocence in her sparkling eyes is impossible to hide. The heavenly demon quietly studies her face for several moments without saying a word. His unusual reaction immediately puzzles Seol-ha, who cannot understand why he is looking at her so intently. Finally, he asks for her name. She politely introduces herself, explaining that this humble servant is called Shin Seol-ha. The heavenly demon softly repeats her name to himself before a faint smile briefly appears on his face. Gond Peixian notices the reaction and curiously asks whether his master already knows the girl. The heavenly demon gently shakes his head and explains that he does not. Her name simply reminds him of something for a brief moment. Deciding not to elaborate any further, he calmly states that they should finish handling the situation and return. As the conversation comes to an end, Seol-ha quietly reflects on everything that has happened. She realizes that if Jeok Yi-gyeon had not arrived when he did, there is little chance she would have escaped without serious injury. Feeling genuinely grateful, she decides that she should at least thank him properly. Gathering her courage, she respectfully expresses her gratitude, saying that she survives today because of his timely intervention. Instead of accepting her thanks, Jeok Yi-gyeon calmly asks whether she truly understands what the word survived actually means. His unexpected question leaves Seol-ha completely confused. Before she can answer, he gently reaches toward her and brushes aside the strands of hair covering the small cut on her neck. His fingers reveal the thin wound left behind by the spy's blade. Looking directly at the injury, he quietly explains that if the dagger had been coated with poison, she would already be dead. Therefore, he cannot honestly claim that he completely protected her. The sudden closeness catches Seol-ha completely off guard. As his face moves only inches away from hers, her eyes instinctively widen, while her cheeks become bright red once again. At the same time, another thought immediately crosses her mind. Thanks to the poison-warding pearl her grandmother secretly gives her, she actually possesses protection against ordinary poisons. Even if the blade had been poisoned, she would most likely have survived. However, after thinking for a brief moment, she decides it is probably wiser not to reveal that information. Instead, she simply smiles awkwardly and replies that regardless of everything else, it is still true that she remains safe because of him. Jeok Yi-gyeon silently watches her for several long moments. Without offering any response, he suddenly turns around and begins walking away. Seol-ha stares after him in confusion. Looking at his back, she cannot help thinking that he somehow appears slightly irritated. Whether she is merely imagining it, or whether something she says truly upsets him, remains impossible for her to determine. Meanwhile, Gond Peixian begins issuing orders to his subordinates. He instructs them to carry the captured spy carefully, emphasizing that as long as the man still possesses valuable information, he must not be allowed to die. Listening to the orders, Seol-ha realizes just how important Gond's responsibilities within Gwihan Pavilion truly are. As she quietly watches him organize everything with remarkable efficiency, another strange feeling begins surfacing inside her mind. The more closely she looks at him, the stronger the sensation becomes. She is certain this is the first time she has ever met Gond Peixian in person, yet his face feels oddly familiar for some reason. No matter how hard she searches her memories, however, she cannot figure out where she might have seen him before. leaving her with an unsettling feeling that refuses to disappear. The next scene shifts to a quiet pond hidden within the peaceful grounds of the demonic cult. The gentle morning breeze stirs the surface of the water, creating small ripples that distort Seolha's reflection. She stands silently at the edge of the pond, staring into the water as she reflects on everything that happened the previous day. The more she thinks about it, the more unbelievable it all seems. First, she is called out by a group of senior maids and almost beaten into a pulp. Then, before she even has time to recover, she is taken hostage by a fleeing spy and nearly loses her life. On top of that, she is unexpectedly rescued by Jeok Yi-gyeon himself, and afterward, she even catches the attention of the heavenly demon, who personally questions her. Thinking back on the endless string of incidents, she smiles helplessly and remarks to herself that she seems to have gone through an entire lifetime's worth of chaos in a single day. For this reason, she confidently convinces herself that surely nothing can possibly happen today. Unfortunately, fate immediately proves her wrong. Just as that reassuring thought crosses her mind, a calm voice suddenly speaks from directly behind her, asking how old she said she was. The unexpected question startles Seolha so badly that she lets out a loud cry before instinctively spinning around. The moment she sees who is standing there, her face instantly pales. It is none other than the heavenly demon himself. Without wasting even a second, she hurriedly bows all the way to the ground and respectfully greets him. The heavenly demon calmly tells her to rise, explaining that there is no need to bow every single time their paths cross. However, before she can respond, he repeats himself and makes it clear that it is an order. Realizing she has no choice, Seolha quickly stands back up. The heavenly demon first confirms that her name is indeed Shin Seolha, and after she politely answers that it is, he begins asking a series of personal questions. He asks how old she is this year, where she lives, and who her parents are. The questions come one after another, leaving Seolha increasingly puzzled. She quietly wonders why someone as important as the ruler of the demonic cult would suddenly become so interested in the personal background of an insignificant maid. Nevertheless, she respectfully answers every question. She explains that she turned 17 this year, that both of her parents are no longer alive, and that she currently lives with her grandmother, who runs a small noodle shop outside the castle walls. The heavenly demon then asks when she loses her parents. Seolha calmly explains that her father passes away in an accident before she is even born, while her mother dies from complications during childbirth while giving birth to her. For this reason, she has never had the chance to meet either of them. After listening quietly, the heavenly demon asks for her father's full name. She respectfully answers that his name is Shin Won-pyong. Hearing the name, the heavenly demon softly repeats it to himself before quietly remarking that, just as he expected, it is not him. His strange response only deepens Seolha's confusion. She cannot help wondering what exactly he means by those words. Yesterday, while looking at her, he also seems to be reminded of someone else, and today the exact same thing happens again. Gradually, Seolha begins suspecting that he is checking whether she has some connection to a person from his past. Before she can ask anything, however, the heavenly demon unexpectedly takes out a small, embroidered pouch and hands it to her. Startled, she instinctively accepts it with both hands. The moment she looks inside, her eyes immediately begin sparkling with surprise. Resting inside the pouch is an elegant hair ornament of exceptional craftsmanship. Completely bewildered, she cannot understand why the heavenly demon would suddenly give her something like this for no apparent reason. The entire situation feels completely illogical. Just as she is about to open her mouth and ask for an explanation, she notices something that stops her words. Once again, she sees the same expression in the heavenly demon's eyes. Although he appears to be looking directly at her, it does not feel as though he is actually seeing her. Instead, his gaze is filled with quiet yearning and deep nostalgia, as though he is reminiscing about someone else through her. More than anything else, it resembles the eyes of someone who dearly misses a person they can never meet again. Witnessing such emotion on the face of the absolute ruler of the demonic cult leaves Seolha speechless. She silently wonders who that mysterious individual could possibly be. What kind of person could leave someone as powerful as the heavenly demon carrying such profound longing, even after all these years? The heavenly demon continues looking at her for several moments before finally turning away. Without another glance, he begins walking off, his robes gently swaying in the breeze. Before disappearing, however, he leaves behind a sentence that makes Seol-ha doubt whether she hears him correctly. He calmly tells her to continue doing whatever she needs to do, and casually adds that he shall visit her from time to time. The unexpected words leave Seol-ha completely stunned. A confused sound escapes her lips as she unconsciously blurts out, "Huh?" Long after the heavenly demon disappears from sight, she remains standing beside the pond, clutching the pouch containing the hair ornament. Countless questions race through her mind, and she can only think that ever since early this morning, her heart feels as though it is going to burst from one unbelievable surprise after another. Every time she believes the chaos has finally ended, something even more unbelievable happens instead. After some time passes and noon gradually approaches, the scene shifts back inside the demonic cult. Seol-ha is standing absent-mindedly with her mouth hanging open after everything that has happened since morning. Before she can gather her thoughts, she suddenly notices a familiar figure rushing toward her with incredible speed. The person charging straight at her is none other than her grandmother, Madame Shin-gyeom, whose face is overflowing with anger and worry. Before Seol-ha can even react, her grandmother grabs her by the shoulders and begins examining her from head to toe. Completely caught off guard, Seol-ha asks, "What brings her all the way here?" Instead of answering calmly, Madame Shin-gyeom immediately demands to see where she is injured. She angrily declares that she hears someone dares to cut her precious granddaughter with a blade, and whoever does such a thing deserves to be torn to shreds. The fury in her voice makes it perfectly clear that she is genuinely prepared to march over and punish the culprit herself. Surprised that the news reaches her grandmother so quickly, Seol-ha immediately asks how she even finds out that she is hurt. Madame Shin-gyeom casually explains that she hears everything from that troublesome young man who frequently visits the noodle shop. The moment she hears that description, Seol-ha immediately blurts out Yang So-baek's name in disbelief. She recalls that before focusing entirely on his training, he asks her to wait for him because he plans to become stronger. Her grandmother confirms that it is indeed him, and explains that the boy comes running into the noodle shop while endlessly boasting about finally succeeding. Curious, Seol-ha excitedly asks what exactly he manages to get into. Madame Shin-gyeom replies that where else could it possibly be other than the Blood Shadow Corps, which has always been the young man's lifelong dream. Hearing that announcement immediately leaves Seol-ha amazed. She cannot help smiling as she thinks that she never expects the lazy slacker she knows to actually pass the extremely difficult Blood Shadow Corps examination. Feeling genuinely happy for him, she promises herself that she absolutely has to congratulate him the next time they meet. After confirming that Seol-ha is completely unharmed, Madame Shin-gyeom finally lets out a long sigh of relief. She admits that her heart nearly stops when she first hears that her granddaughter is injured. However, now that she sees Seol-ha standing safely before her without any serious wounds, she feels much more at ease. Since there is still a noodle shop waiting to be managed, she says that this old granny has to return to work. Before leaving, she gently pats Seol-ha on the head and smiles warmly. She reminds her granddaughter that there are only 2 months remaining on her contract. She honestly admits that she has never cared about living in luxury or enjoying wealth. As long as Seol-ha safely leaves the demonic cult when her contract ends, she wants her to stay by her side from then onward. Hearing those heartfelt words fills Seol-ha with emotion. She immediately hugs her grandmother tightly and promises that she understands. With tears almost forming in her eyes, she sincerely thanks her grandmother for coming all this way just to check on her, adding that she truly is the best grandmother in the world. Madame Shin-gyeom affectionately smiles before turning around to leave. The two continue waving goodbye to each other until her grandmother gradually disappears into the distance. As Seol-ha watches her leave, she quietly reflects that seeing her grandmother somewhere other than their little home somehow makes her feel even more precious than usual. However, while continuing to wave, another thought suddenly flashes across her mind. She abruptly remembers where she has seen Gon Pacheon before. It is at the noodle shop. A forgotten memory resurfaces of seeing him there years ago when she first arrives in this world. At the time, she finds it incredibly strange that such a refined and distinguished customer behaves so naturally while chatting with her grandmother. Now everything finally makes sense. No wonder his face feels so familiar when she sees him at the castle. She even remembers being surprised that someone who appears completely out of place inside an ordinary noodle shop speaks with Madame Shin-gyeom as though they have known each other for years. Realizing she completely forgets about that memory until now leaves her astonished. The atmosphere between the two back then feels unusually close, making Seol-ha suspect that Gon Pacheon may actually be one of her grandmother's old acquaintances. Since the mystery continues bothering her, she decides that during her next leave, she will ask her grandmother directly rather than continuing to wonder about it. For the moment, however, she reminds herself that she needs to finish today's work as quickly as possible before requesting leave from Madame Gwak. With that determination, Seol-ha heads toward the second young master's residence. As she reaches the room and casually pushes open the door, she freezes completely. The moment her eyes meet the person standing inside, it almost feels as though her soul leaves her body. Standing quietly inside the room is Jeok-gi-yeon himself. Completely caught off guard, Seol-ha can only stare at him in disbelief. Jeok-gi-yeon calmly asks whether she is only just arriving now. His question immediately throws her mind into confusion. According to everything she knows from the novel and from observing his daily routine, this should be the exact time when he is training at the martial grounds. She cannot understand why he is standing here instead. Unable to hide her confusion, she cautiously asks why he is here. Jeok-gi-yeon calmly explains that he has something he wants to ask her. For that reason, he waits here specifically for her return. His unexpected answer only increases Seol-ha's uneasiness. Without wasting another moment, Jeok-gi-yeon asks where she learns martial arts. The question completely catches her off guard. She stares at him in bewilderment before asking what he means by martial arts. She honestly insists that someone of her lowly status could never have the opportunity to learn such techniques. She has never received martial arts training in her entire life. Jeok-gi-yeon quietly studies her expression before calmly asking whether she truly knows absolutely nothing about martial arts. Before Seol-ha can answer again, he suddenly steps closer. Without warning, he reaches forward and firmly grabs her wrist. The sudden contact startles her so much that her face instantly turns bright red. Before she can even process what is happening, he pulls her closer until only a short distance separates them. Completely flustered by the unexpected closeness, Seol-ha can only stare at him with wide, confused eyes. Meanwhile, Jeok-gi-yeon's expression remains perfectly serious. While tightly holding her wrist, he quietly asks that if she truly has never practiced martial arts, then what exactly is the meaning of the enormous energy he can clearly sense inside her body? His unexpected question immediately leaves Seol-ha speechless as a wave of confusion crashes over her, for she has absolutely no idea what he is talking about. Seol-ha can only stare at him in complete confusion before quietly asking, "Pardon? Energy?" The words make absolutely no sense to her. Seeing the bewilderment on her face, Jeok-gi-yeon slowly loosens his grip on her wrist. His expression remains calm, but there is still obvious suspicion in his eyes as he asks whether she truly does not know the condition of her own body. Seol-ha honestly replies that she has absolutely no idea what he is talking about. She insists that she genuinely does not understand any of it. After studying her face for a few moments, Jeok-gi-yeon finally concludes that there is no point pressing the matter further. He calmly announces that if she truly knows nothing, then there is only one solution. Starting from the very next day, she will train with him for 4 hours every single day. Hearing those words, Seol-ha nearly jumps in shock and blurts out, "Training?" The sudden declaration completely catches her off guard. Jeok-gi-yeon explains his reasoning without changing his expression. He asks what she intends to do if another incident like the recent hostage situation happens again. According to him, she needs to learn how to protect herself, rather than relying on luck or someone else to rescue her. He further states that he intends to teach her how to control the enormous energy hidden inside her body until it completely becomes her own. Seol-ha cannot believe what she is hearing. She immediately wonders who in the world would personally spend time training an insignificant maid like her. Jeok-gi-yeon answers the question himself. Looking directly at her, he asks who else it could possibly be besides him. Before long, another scene begins on a peaceful afternoon at the training grounds. True to his word, Jeok-gi-yeon immediately starts putting Seol-ha through martial arts training. Meanwhile, Seol-ha can only complain inwardly. She sarcastically thinks that calling this training feels generous, since it looks much more like a brand new method of bullying. Completely ignoring her internal complaints, Jeok-gi-yeon continues giving precise instructions. He orders her to bend her knees even lower and lower her stance further. He explains that she must place strength all the way down to the tips of her toes so that her lower body will remain perfectly steady. According to him, The exercise becomes much easier if she imagines herself taking root deep within the ground like a tree. Listening to such an unusual explanation, Seol-ha becomes even more speechless. She cannot help thinking that she is a person, not some plant, and wonders what exactly he means by taking root in the ground. As she struggles to maintain the exhausting stance, Seol-ha recalls everything that led to this situation. Yesterday, she honestly believed Jeok Yi-jeon's words were nothing more than a joke meant to frighten her. She never imagined he would actually summon her to the training grounds and personally oversee her training. Thinking back further, she realizes that being taken hostage by that Murim Alliance spy has completely backfired. Instead of becoming a one-time terrifying experience, it has turned into a permanent burden that now forces her into this exhausting routine. She silently laments that one unfortunate incident has somehow created an even bigger problem for her daily life. Sometime later, Jeonggang arrives at the training grounds and watches the scene unfold with visible concern. Seeing Seol-ha struggling to maintain the horse-riding stance while sweat continuously pours down her face, he politely approaches Jeok Yi-jeon. He respectfully suggests that perhaps they should end the training session for the day. He points out that Seol-ha has already gone through a terrifying ordeal only recently, and he worries that pushing her this hard might cause her to become sick from overwork. Rather than answering immediately, Jeok Yi-jeon smiles faintly before asking Jeonggang a question of his own. He asks how long an ordinary woman would normally be capable of maintaining the horse-riding stance. Jeonggang thinks carefully before answering that, under normal circumstances, about 15 minutes would already be considered impressive. Jeok Yi-jeon calmly points out that Seol-ha has already maintained the stance for well over 30 minutes without collapsing. Hearing that, Seol-ha becomes completely stunned. At that moment, she finally understands what he has been trying to confirm all along. Until now, she thought he was simply forcing her into an unnecessarily painful exercise. However, he intentionally made her hold the horse stance to observe her physical condition and test whether the mysterious energy inside her body was real. Finally allowing her to stand normally again, Jeok Yi-jeon looks directly at her and asks whether she still intends to pretend that she has never learned martial arts. Feeling cornered, Seol-ha hesitates before awkwardly admitting that she has learned a little. Jeok Yi-jeon immediately questions what she means by a little. Embarrassed, Seol-ha explains that it is technically true. Whatever she learned is so insignificant that she never considered herself someone who had actually studied martial arts. Even while saying it, she feels her explanation sounds weak. Jeok Yi-jeon continues watching her with obvious suspicion. He remarks that regardless of her claims, the tremendous energy flowing inside her body is anything but insignificant. Seol-ha can only stare back with complete confusion written across her face. Seeing that she still does not understand, Jeok Yi-jeon explains that the energy spreading throughout every one of her meridians is already comparable to one gabja of internal energy. The moment she hears those words, Seol-ha's eyes widen dramatically as she blurts out, "What?" Her thoughts immediately begin racing. One gabja represents 60 years. If his words are true, then she somehow possesses 60 years worth of internal energy inside her body. The realization leaves her completely dumbfounded. Jeonggang also looks surprised and asks whether she has recently consumed some kind of precious elixir. Seol-ha immediately shakes her head and honestly replies that she has not. She points out that elixirs are incredibly expensive treasures. Someone of her humble status could never dream of obtaining one. Jeok Yi-jeon quietly comments that the situation is becoming more and more amusing. He remarks that consuming an elixir without the person involved even realizing it is certainly unusual. Nevertheless, he decides that investigating the source of her mysterious power can wait until another time. For the moment, there are more important matters to address. He calmly instructs her to sit down on the ground and cross her legs. Still completely confused about where all of this is leading, Seol-ha obediently prepares to do as instructed, while silently wondering why sitting cross-legged has suddenly become part of her training. After instructing Seol-ha to sit down cross-legged, Jeok Yi-jeon calmly tells her that he is going to open the path for her and that she must simply follow his guidance. His words immediately leave Seol-ha confused. She wonders what he means by following him and cannot begin to imagine what is about to happen. Nevertheless, she obediently sits in the instructed position while trying to calm her racing heart. Once she settles into place, Jeok Yi-jeon steps behind her and gently places one hand against the center of her back. Although the gesture itself is simple, the atmosphere immediately becomes much more serious. He explains that although he is going to assist her this one time, everything afterward will depend entirely on her own efforts. According to him, the immense internal energy currently scattered throughout every meridian in her body must gradually be gathered into her dantian until it completely becomes her own. In order to make that possible, he states that he will first open her Beiko acupoint and guide the initial flow of energy. Listening to such unfamiliar terminology, Seol-ha cannot help recalling countless martial arts novels from her previous life. She hesitantly wonders whether this process is something similar to overcoming the Ren and Du meridians that she used to read about. Hearing her question, Jaeok Yijeon calmly explains that what they are about to do goes even beyond merely opening the Ren and Du meridians. He tells her that they are beginning the process of opening the 8 extraordinary meridians. However, since she is not accomplishing the breakthrough entirely through her own strength, this should only be considered the beginning rather than a true completion. Even so, he assures her that if she faithfully continues training afterward and learns to communicate naturally with the energy of heaven and earth, there is even a possibility that she could eventually undergo a complete transformation of both her bones and body. Those words immediately leave Seol-ha speechless. Inside her mind, excitement rapidly begins replacing fear. She cannot help thinking that this sounds completely unreal. During her previous life, whenever she read martial arts novels, she always admired the legendary masters of Muram, who possessed unimaginable abilities. The possibility that she herself might one day stand among those very people feels almost too unbelievable to accept. Without giving her any more time to become distracted, Jaeok Yijeon quietly instructs her to focus entirely on the flow of energy and assures her that they will proceed slowly. The instant he begins circulating his own internal energy through the hand resting against her back, Seol-ha immediately notices something extraordinary. Unlike the warmth of his hand, the energy itself feels incredibly cold and razor-sharp. Rather than comforting her, it sends a chilling sensation throughout her entire body. Before long, her consciousness begins drifting inward, and she finds herself within an unfamiliar inner realm, created entirely by the flow of internal energy. There, she notices a circular obstruction standing directly before her. Almost instinctively, she realizes that this represents the pathway leading toward the Junggang acupoint, the very first acupoint of the Du meridian. Understanding that she must break through it herself, she clenches her fist and strikes forward with all her strength. To her surprise, the first obstacle proves far less difficult than she originally expected. Encouraged by the successful breakthrough, she tells herself that she must keep this momentum going all the way until the end. She continues advancing through the pathways one after another, passing the Junggang acupoint before progressing toward Yosu, Yoyang, Guan, and eventually the Myeongmoon acupoint, while steadily following the route opened by Jaeok Yijeon's guidance. As Jaeok Yijeon's energy continues leading the way through her Du meridian, the situation rapidly changes. What initially seemed manageable suddenly becomes unimaginably painful. Seol-ha feels as though countless insects are crawling beneath her skin, relentlessly moving throughout every part of her body. At the same time, an overwhelming headache explodes inside her mind, making it increasingly difficult to remain focused. Every passing moment causes the pain to intensify further until her concentration begins slipping away completely. Back in the real world, Jaeok Yijeon immediately notices the dangerous change in her condition. Realizing that she is on the verge of losing control, he sharply orders her to get a grip on herself. He warns that if she loses focus now, she may very well spend the rest of her life as a cripple. His stern voice instantly reaches her consciousness. Those words snap Seol-ha back to her senses. Inside her mind, she desperately reminds herself that she cannot allow such a future to happen. She realizes that this opportunity has appeared before her completely out of nowhere, almost like a blessing from heaven itself. There is no way she can throw away such a precious chance through weakness. Summoning every remaining ounce of determination, she repeatedly encourages herself to endure the pain just a little longer. She understands that if she loses consciousness at this critical moment, it will immediately result in chi deviation, a disastrous outcome capable of permanently ruining a martial artist's body. For this reason, she desperately continues pushing forward, while silently repeating that she only needs to endure for a little longer. Finally, after what feels like an eternity, everything suddenly changes. Seol-ha's consciousness returns to the real world almost instantly. Her eyes slowly open as tears begin flowing down her cheeks without her even realizing it. For a brief moment, she expects the unbearable headache to continue tormenting her. Instead, the pain disappears completely in a single instant. In its place, an incredibly refreshing coolness spreads throughout her entire body, wrapping around her like a gentle breeze and washing away every trace of exhaustion. The overwhelming relief almost feels unreal. However, before she can even process what has happened, the immense physical and mental strain finally catches up with her. Her vision gradually becomes blurry as every ounce of strength leaves her body. Thinking that she has finally reached her limit, she quietly loses consciousness. Her body collapses forward onto the ground as though she has simply fallen asleep. Watching the sudden collapse, both Chong-gong and Jeok-yi-geon immediately become visibly concerned as they move toward the unconscious Seol-ha, uncertain whether the dangerous process has truly ended successfully or whether another unexpected complication is about to begin. After an unknown amount of time passes, Seol-ha slowly begins regaining consciousness while lying comfortably on a soft bed. Her mind remains hazy as she instinctively buries herself deeper beneath the blanket. The pleasant scent of blankets that have been freshly dried beneath the warm sunlight gently fills her senses, making her feel unusually relaxed. Half asleep, she cannot help thinking that the blanket feels exceptionally comfortable today. For a brief moment, she simply wishes to remain there without opening her eyes. The warmth surrounding her body feels so soothing that she has no desire to get out of bed. However, almost immediately afterward, a disturbing realization suddenly flashes through her mind. Something feels completely wrong. Her eyes snap open, and she quickly sits upright. Looking around the unfamiliar surroundings, she panics and wonders where in the world she is. The last thing she clearly remembers is collapsing unconscious while cultivating under Jeok-yi-geon's guidance. If that is the case, then why is she not waking up inside her own small room? Still trying to understand the situation, Seol-ha carefully examines every corner of the room. The elegant furnishings, refined decorations, and overall atmosphere quickly make her realize she is definitely not inside the servants' quarters. Before she can gather her thoughts any further, a calm voice reaches her ears from outside the inner room, telling her to come out if she is awake. Hearing that familiar voice causes her entire body to stiffen. She nervously climbs out of the bed while thinking that she must have completely lost her mind. Of all the places she could possibly wake up, this has to be the absolute worst. Taking several hesitant steps, she walks outside and immediately freezes the moment she sees the person calmly sitting at a nearby table. Jeok-yi-geon is quietly sipping tea as though nothing unusual has happened. The sight completely overwhelms Seol-ha. She immediately drops to her knees and bows deeply before him, loudly declaring that she has committed a crime deserving of death. She frantically apologizes for daring to sleep on the young master's bed and states that she is willing to accept whatever punishment he chooses to give her. The only thing she desperately asks is that he spare her life. Watching her panic with complete sincerity, Jeok-yi-geon simply looks at her with mild confusion. He honestly admits that he cannot understand why she keeps begging for her life every time they interact. He calmly asks whether she is still that frightened of him. Inside her heart, Seol-ha immediately answers yes without the slightest hesitation. However, there is no possibility she would ever dare say such a thing aloud. Instead, she hurriedly insists that she is not frightened at all. She even awkwardly claims that all the maids constantly praise the young master's wonderful personality. Hearing that explanation only causes Jeok-yi-geon to become even more puzzled. He quietly remarks that if what she says is true, then her behavior makes even less sense. He points out that she cannot even properly look him in the eyes whenever they speak. Furthermore, every single time they meet, she appears to be searching for an opportunity to run away. No matter how much he thinks about it, he simply cannot understand the reason behind such obvious avoidance. His direct observation immediately catches Seol-ha off guard. She lets out a small, awkward sound while inwardly panicking. She cannot believe her attempts to hide her fear have been so painfully obvious all this time. Nevertheless, Jeok-yi-geon refuses to let the matter go. He calmly states that she should not bother making excuses. In his opinion, there is definitely a specific reason why she keeps avoiding him. Realizing there is no safe answer to such a dangerous question, Seol-ha desperately forces an awkward smile onto her face. She respectfully explains that this humble servant is merely trying her best to perform her duties properly as his personal maid. For this reason, she politely asks him to forget everything that happened today. Still smiling nervously, she admits that she honestly has no idea what she was thinking when she accidentally fell asleep there. Jeok Yi-jeon quietly interrupts her explanation with a simple statement. He tells her that he was the one who did it. Completely confused, Seol-ha asks what exactly he means. Without changing his expression, Jeok Yi-jeon calmly explains that after she lost consciousness during cultivation, he personally carried her into his room and placed her on the bed so she could rest comfortably. The explanation leaves Seol-ha utterly speechless. Her eyes widen to their limit as she practically shouts in disbelief, asking whether the young master himself actually carried someone as insignificant as her. Jeok Yi-jeon simply asks whether there is some sort of problem with that. Inside her mind, Seol-ha cannot stop screaming. From her perspective, there is an enormous problem. She remembers better than anyone that Jeok Yi-jeon is an extreme, clean freak who refuses to allow anyone else near his personal belongings. According to the original novel, he never permits another person to use his bed under any circumstances. More than one foolish woman loses her life simply for sneaking into his bedroom in an attempt to seduce him. Yet somehow, he not only allows a maid to remain inside his room, but personally carries her onto his own bed so she can rest. If anyone who had read the original story witnessed such a scene, they would undoubtedly think they had entered an entirely different novel. Seeing that she has finally calmed down slightly, Jeok Yi-jeon changes the subject and tells her that she should now try circulating her chi. Seol-ha looks at him in confusion and asks whether he means right now. He calmly reminds her that they completed yesterday's cultivation session, so naturally she should verify the results for herself. Hearing that, Seol-ha finally realizes he is right. She quietly nods before stepping away from the bed and sitting cross-legged on the floor. Taking a slow breath, she closes her eyes and begins circulating the energy throughout her body exactly as he taught her. The instant her chi begins flowing, Seol-ha feels an astonishing difference. The energy moves through her body with unbelievable smoothness, completely unlike before. There is no resistance whatsoever. Every pathway feels perfectly open, allowing her internal energy to circulate effortlessly from beginning to end. Her heart begins racing with excitement as she realizes something incredible has happened. Moments later, she slowly opens her eyes in complete amazement. Inside her mind, only one thought remains. Every one of her acupoints has been completely unblocked. After carefully circulating her chi and confirming that every one of her acupoints has opened successfully, Seol-ha slowly opens her eyes, still unable to believe the dramatic change inside her body. Seeing her astonished expression, Jeok Yi-jeon calmly asks how it feels to become an expert possessing one gabja of internal energy. At first, Seol-ha can only stare at him in confusion, still trying to process everything that has happened over the past 2 days. Finally regaining her composure, she respectfully lowers her head and admits that she has received nothing less than a miraculous blessing. She sincerely tells him that she cannot possibly imagine how she could ever repay such an enormous favor. However, Jeok Yi-jeon immediately dismisses the idea. He calmly states that there is no need for her to repay him in any way. Instead, all she needs to do is continue training under him. The moment those words leave his mouth, Seol-ha's grateful smile instantly disappears. Her eyes widen as she repeats his words in disbelief, asking, "More training?" Jeok Yi-jeon nods without hesitation before explaining his reasoning in detail. According to him, although she now possesses internal energy comparable to an expert with 1 gabja of cultivation, her actual martial arts skills remain far below that level. Simply possessing enormous internal energy means very little if she lacks the proper techniques needed to utilize it effectively. If she never learns genuine martial arts, then she will merely become slightly stronger than before, while wasting the tremendous potential hidden inside her body. For this reason, he informs her that from now onward, her only responsibility as his maid will be preparing his meals. Every remaining moment of her free time will be devoted entirely to martial arts training. Seol-ha nearly cries after hearing such a declaration. She hurriedly insists that she is nothing more than an ordinary maid, and that he truly does not need to go this far for someone like her. While speaking politely on the outside, her thoughts become completely chaotic. She cannot stop wondering what exactly Jeok Yi-jeon is trying to turn her into. The amount of time, effort, and valuable cultivation he keeps investing in her no longer makes any sense. She even begins wondering whether he intends to raise her into some kind of personal bodyguard in the future. No matter how much she thinks about it, nothing seems capable of explaining his unusual actions. Before she can continue questioning the situation, a guard standing outside suddenly announces that the first young master has arrived. Hearing those words immediately causes Seolha's attention to shift toward the entrance. Jeok-jian calmly orders the guard to let him enter. Meanwhile, Seolha quietly recalls everything she knows from the original novel. The first young master, Jeok-baek, is not someone who ever visits without a purpose. She cannot help wondering what sort of scheme that cunning man is plotting by suddenly appearing here. A few moments later, the first young master casually walks into the room. The moment Seolha sees him, she cannot deny that he is every bit as handsome as his younger brother, although their appearances are completely different. Unlike Jeok-jian's cold and intimidating aura, Jeok-baek possesses striking red hair, accompanied by a warm, charming smile that easily puts others at ease. The moment he enters, he cheerfully greets his younger brother by affectionately calling him his beloved little brother. Jeok-jian calmly returns the greeting, acknowledging his older brother's arrival without displaying much emotion. Jeok-baek continues smiling as he remarks that since his younger brother never bothers visiting him, he had no choice but to come personally. While speaking, his eyes suddenly shift toward Seolha, who has remained silently standing nearby throughout the conversation. He immediately points at her before letting out an amused laugh. Pretending to be surprised, he remarks that he never realized his little brother possessed this particular side to his personality. He jokingly comments that he had been wondering why Jeok-jian had been acting unusually quiet recently, but now it seems he has finally discovered the reason. According to him, Seolha must apparently be his younger brother's preferred type. The completely unexpected accusation immediately irritates Seolha. Inside her mind, she cannot stop complaining about how ridiculous the entire situation is. She has not even exchanged a proper conversation with this man, yet he suddenly begins making outrageous assumptions without any basis whatsoever. Meanwhile, Jeok-baek continues teasing them as though thoroughly enjoying himself. Chuckling to himself, he casually remarks that if Seolha had happened to catch his attention first, she would have belonged to him instead. He even comments that it is truly a shame such an interesting girl ended up beside his younger brother before leisurely taking another sip of tea. Finally, Jeok-jian speaks. Looking completely unimpressed, he calmly asks his older brother what exactly he has been talking about this entire time. Jeok-baek only laughs louder before asking whether his younger brother is feeling embarrassed now. He casually claims there is no need to pretend to be innocent in front of family. According to him, any man naturally desires to keep the woman he likes close to himself. As he continues observing Seolha, he teasingly remarks that the more he looks at her, the more charming she appears. He confidently predicts that within a few more years, she will undoubtedly grow into an extraordinary beauty. Throughout the entire conversation, Seolha grows increasingly uncomfortable. Before she can even process his previous remarks, Jeok-baek suddenly turns directly toward her and casually asks whether she would like to spend the night in his bedroom. The shameless invitation immediately fills Seolha with disgust. Internally, she cannot stop cursing him. She already knows from the novel that Jeok-baek is an infamous womanizer, but witnessing his behavior in person makes her realize he is even worse than she imagined. Every instinct tells her to punch him across the face. Unfortunately, as nothing more than a maid, she cannot even speak back against someone of his status. Noticing the obvious discomfort written across Seolha's face, Jeok-jian finally intervenes. His expression immediately turns cold as he tells his older brother that his words are as filthy as ever. He advises him to show at least a little dignity while standing inside Jeonnyeong Pavilion. He even bluntly states that his brother's vulgar behavior disgusts him so much that it makes him want to cut off his own ears. Those harsh words instantly wipe the smile from Jeok-baek's face. Rising from his chair in anger, he loudly demands to know whether this is truly how his younger brother intends to speak after he personally came all the way there out of consideration for him. While grabbing Jeok-jian's collar, he suddenly smirks as another thought occurs to him. He teasingly asks whether his younger brother is acting so aggressively because he fears having Seolha taken away. Seeing such an intense reaction only makes him even more interested. Declaring that he now refuses to give up, Jeok-baek boldly announces that he absolutely intends to take that maid away with him today. Standing nearby, Seol-ha can only watch the brothers in complete terror as the atmosphere inside the room rapidly becomes suffocating. Without showing the slightest sign of backing down, Jeok Yi-jeon calmly responds that if his brother truly wants to take her away, then he should first try winning her through a duel. The challenge immediately causes the atmosphere to become incredibly tense. Jeok Wi-baek slowly grins before confidently replying that such an arrangement is perfectly acceptable, provided his younger brother truly possesses what it takes to defeat him. As the two brothers stare directly into each other's eyes, the tension between them grows so overwhelming that even the air inside the room seems to become heavier, while Seol-ha silently wonders how an ordinary maid like herself has somehow become the center of a confrontation between the two most powerful young masters of the demonic cult. The first young master merely tightens his grip on Jeok Yi-jeon's collar and declares that he should only say such things if he truly believes he is capable of backing them up. His expression twists with anger as he grits his teeth and glares at his younger brother. The pressure in his hand increases even further, yet Jeok Yi-jeon remains completely unfazed. Without displaying the slightest trace of emotion, he simply pushes his brother's hand away as though brushing aside an insignificant inconvenience. He calmly turns around and begins walking away, coldly remarking that his brother truly is an unbearably rude bastard. The confrontation ends just as suddenly as it begins, but the suffocating tension lingering inside the room remains. Standing nearby, Seol-ha unconsciously releases the breath she has been holding the entire time. Relief washes over her as she realizes how close she has come to disaster. She cannot help thinking that if Jeok Yi-jeon had not stepped in, she might genuinely have ended up being dragged away and forced to become Jeok Wi-baek's woman. The mere thought sends a chill down her spine. At the same time, she realizes that this is already the second time Jeok Yi-jeon has unknowingly rescued her. Feeling sincerely grateful, she politely thanks him for helping her. However, Jeok Yi-jeon's attention is clearly somewhere else. His expression remains cold as he mutters that Jeok Wi-baek had actually dared to set his sights on something that belongs to him. Hearing those words causes Seol-ha to freeze. She blinks several times, wondering whether he is actually referring to her. Before she can even process the meaning behind that statement, Jeok Yi-jeon turns back toward her and calmly announces that this simply will not do. Originally, he intends to resume her martial arts training the following day. However, after what has just happened, he decides that waiting any longer is no longer acceptable. Instead, he informs her that the training will resume immediately. He states that he will be waiting for her at the training grounds first, and orders her to change into suitable clothing before coming over without delay. The announcement strikes Seol-ha like lightning. Her face immediately fills with despair as she lets out a silent cry inside her heart. Nevertheless, she knows better than to argue with him. Lowering her head, she obediently acknowledges the order. Outside the room, Cheonggang happens to overhear the entire conversation. Watching everything unfold from beyond the doorway, he can only smile awkwardly at the increasingly unusual relationship developing between his young master and the terrified maid. The following day, Seol-ha quickly discovers that the consequences of yesterday's events have spread much farther than she imagines. While making her way through Jamie Pavilion, she suddenly realizes that she has completely overlooked something obvious. If even Jeok Wi-baek knows about her, then the rumors must have already circulated throughout the entire castle. Before she can escape, several maids immediately surround her with sparkling eyes filled with excitement. They eagerly ask whether the unbelievable rumor is actually true. According to the gossip spreading throughout the residence, she supposedly spends the entire night inside Jeonnyeong Pavilion. Even more shocking, people are claiming that the second young master has finally chosen a woman, and that woman is none other than Seol-ha herself. The maids excitedly remark that although she is pretty and hardworking, none of them ever expect something like this to happen. Hearing such outrageous conclusions makes Seol-ha's face flush with embarrassment. She hurriedly denies everything, insisting that there is absolutely no way the second young master would ever take interest in an ordinary maid like her. According to her, the entire situation is simply one enormous misunderstanding. Unfortunately, her explanation only seems to make the rumors even worse. One of the maids suspiciously asks whether it is really true that she remains inside Jeonnyeong Pavilion all night. Seol-ha hesitates briefly before admitting that she does indeed stay there throughout the night. The moment those words leave her mouth, every maid gasps dramatically. Before they can jump to another ridiculous conclusion, she hurriedly explains that she only says she stays awake all night, not that she sleeps there. The maids immediately protest that those two situations practically sound identical. They demand to know why she remains there until morning in the first place. Realizing that a simple denial will never satisfy them, Seol-ha quickly invents a believable excuse. She lowers her voice and explains that the second young master suddenly falls ill. Normally, before everyone leaves for the evening, he always kindly acknowledges the servants for their hard work. However, on that particular night, he gives no response at all. Feeling that something is wrong, she checks on him and discovers that he is burning with a terrible fever. The surrounding maids immediately imagine the usually cold and terrifying second young master, lying helplessly in bed while suffering from a high fever. Some even picture him weakly murmuring that his body feels unbearably hot. The image alone shocks everyone present. Seol-ha continues her fabricated story without missing a beat. She explains that she immediately summons a physician and remains by his bedside throughout the entire night, personally assisting with everything until dawn arrives before she even realizes it. While maintaining a perfectly calm expression on the outside, she nervously prays inside that none of the maids decide to verify her story with the medical hall. After all, the entire explanation is nothing more than an elaborate lie created to stop the rumors from growing even further. Finally, she reassures everyone that the second young master thankfully recovers completely within a single day, so there is no reason for anyone to worry about his health anymore. The maids exchange uncertain glances before one of them slowly walks closer. Narrowing her eyes, she asks whether every single word Seol-ha has just said is truly the truth. For a split second, Seol-ha stiffens. Then she forces an innocent smile onto her face and confidently assures them that, of course, everything she says is completely true. Internally, however, she can only hope that none of them decide to investigate any further, since the entire story is held together by nothing more than desperate improvisation. Even after telling such an elaborate story, Seol-ha quickly realizes that it still is not enough to completely erase the suspicions surrounding her. Looking at the doubtful expressions on the other maids' faces, she concludes that situations like this require one decisive move capable of ending the rumors once and for all. Taking a deep breath, she sincerely asks everyone to trust her. She insists that she truly does not possess even the slightest impure thoughts toward the second young master. Then, after deliberately acting shy and lowering her gaze, she quietly reveals that there is already someone she likes. The unexpected confession explodes like a bomb among the gathered maids. Every one of them gasps in disbelief before loudly asking whether she is actually serious. Seol-ha calmly nods and explains that the man she likes has recently passed the Blood Shadow Corps selection examination. She even adds that if an opportunity presents itself later, she will happily introduce him to everyone. Meanwhile, inside her mind, she immediately apologizes to young Simek for dragging him into such an outrageous lie. She consoles herself by thinking that this is exactly what friends are for, and promises that she will make it up to him someday. For now, however, she desperately needs this rumor to die before it grows any larger. Convinced that she has finally settled everything, Seol-ha believes she can return to her peaceful routine. Unfortunately, reality proves far crueler than she expects. Rather than disappearing, the rumors simply evolve into something entirely different. From that day onward, almost every maid she meets begins treating her as though she is already engaged. Some excitedly ask whether it is true that she plans to resign from her maid duties because of her upcoming wedding. Others eagerly wonder when the ceremony will take place. Several even comment that although 17 seems a little young for marriage, a man capable of passing the Blood Shadow Corps selection must be an exceptional husband, so she should secure him before someone else does. Every single day, Seol-ha is forced to endure countless questions, congratulations, and teasing remarks. Listening to them repeatedly makes her regret inventing the lie more and more. She bitterly reflects that people always say one lie inevitably leads to another, and now she finally understands exactly what that saying means. Even so, she decides there is nothing she can do anymore. After all, she only has about 2 months remaining before she leaves the demonic cult forever. Once she is gone, she probably will never meet these people again. Thinking about the peaceful future waiting for her after those 2 months gives her just enough motivation to continue enduring the awkward situation. While walking through the castle grounds one afternoon, Seol-ha suddenly notices a familiar figure standing nearby. She instinctively slows her steps and carefully studies the young man, feeling as though she recognizes him. At almost the same moment, the young man notices her as well. His face immediately lights up with a bright smile as he happily calls out her name. Hearing that familiar voice causes Seolha's eyes to widen dramatically. She stares at him with her mouth hanging open before shouting in complete disbelief that it is young Seolbak. Completely confused by his unexpected appearance, she quickly asks why he has come all the way inside the castle. If he has business with her, they could simply have met at her grandmother's noodle shop. She cannot understand why he would suddenly come searching for her here. Instead of answering immediately, Yang Sebek excitedly rushes straight toward her with an expression overflowing with happiness. Seeing him charging forward so enthusiastically causes Seolha to panic. For one horrifying moment, she genuinely believes he is about to embrace her. Acting entirely on instinct, she hurriedly yells at him to stop behaving so strangely before forcefully pushing him away. Yang Seobek immediately loses his balance and falls onto the ground. The moment she realizes what she has done, Seolha's expression fills with guilt. She hurriedly apologizes and anxiously asks whether he is hurt, explaining that she simply reacts without thinking. Yang Seobek slowly gets back up while reassuring her that he is perfectly fine. Smiling awkwardly, he tells her not to worry, adding that he completely understands how she feels. According to him, if she is feeling embarrassed, it is only natural that she might accidentally hit someone. Hearing such a strange response leaves Seolha completely bewildered. She has absolutely no idea what he is talking about. Yang Seobak then reveals the misunderstanding that has been brewing inside his mind. Looking at her with surprising sincerity, he admits that all this time he never realizes she feels that way about him. Then, with complete honesty, he declares that if she truly wants it as well, he is willing to marry her that very day. His shocking proposal echoes repeatedly inside Seolha's mind, as though time itself has frozen. For several long seconds, she can only stare at him in utter disbelief before weakly repeating the word, "Marry?" Inside her head, panic completely takes over. She immediately realizes that this hopelessly innocent fool has actually believed every ridiculous rumor circulating through the castle. At that moment, overwhelming guilt crashes down on her. She cannot believe she sacrifices such an innocent and sincere friend simply to protect herself from gossip. Feeling terrible, she hurriedly begins explaining that he has completely misunderstood everything. She apologizes before admitting that she only uses his name as a convenient cover to silence the rumors surrounding herself. However, before she can finish explaining the truth, another voice suddenly interrupts the conversation. A cold and familiar presence approaches from behind. Seolha instinctively turns around, only to see the second young master standing there. His expression is noticeably darker than usual, and his eyes are fixed firmly on the two of them. Without taking his gaze off Yang Seobaek, he calmly asks exactly what they are talking about. Then, after hearing the word "marry," his eyes narrow dangerously. A faint trace of anger appears across his face as he slowly repeats the word under his breath before asking in a cold voice exactly who is supposed to be marrying whom. The atmosphere instantly turns heavy, leaving both Seolha and Yang Seobek frozen where they stand. The second young master slowly walks toward the two of them, and the moment he arrives, the atmosphere changes completely. His face is filled with unmistakable anger, while the overwhelming pressure radiating from him makes the surrounding air feel unbearably heavy. Seolha instinctively stiffens the instant she sees the look on his face. Countless thoughts race through her mind as she wonders why he is staring at her like that. She cannot help asking herself whether she has somehow managed to do something wrong yet again. At the same time, Yang Seobak finally recognizes exactly who is standing before him. The color immediately drains from his face, and he hurriedly drops to one knee before respectfully greeting the second young master. He introduces himself as Yang Seobak, from the Blood Shadow Corps, 10th Strike Squad. Jeok Yi-gyeon quietly listens before remarking that if Yang Seobak truly belongs to the 10th Strike Squad, then he must still be a rookie. His expression remains cold, as he points out that this is not Blood Shadow Corps territory, before demanding to know why a rookie like him has business here. The sharp question immediately causes Yang Seobak to become visibly nervous. His confidence disappears in an instant, and he hesitates, clearly unsure how to answer without making the situation even worse. Before Yang Seobak can stumble through an explanation, Seolha hurriedly steps forward and respectfully interrupts. She politely tells the second young master that she will explain everything herself. According to her, The entire situation begins with nothing more than a small misunderstanding, and she assures him that there is a perfectly reasonable explanation for everything he has just witnessed. While speaking, she secretly turns toward young Seobuk and gives him a subtle wink, silently urging him to leave first while promising to explain everything later. Young Seobuk immediately understands what she is trying to tell him. He quietly nods, giving her a reassuring smile that lets her know he will wait until later before asking any more questions. Without creating any further trouble, he respectfully bows once more before quickly leaving the area. Watching him disappear into the distance, Seol-ha unconsciously lets out a long sigh of relief. Inside her heart, she compares the feeling to watching a ticking bomb finally disappear before it has the chance to explode. Once Yang Seobuk is gone, Jeok Yi-jeon shifts his full attention back towards Seol-ha. In a calm, yet unmistakably serious voice, he asks exactly what all of that is supposed to mean. From what he overhears, it sounds very much as though she has just received a marriage proposal. He then bluntly asks whether she is actually planning to marry that man. The unexpected question leaves Seol-ha momentarily speechless. She hurriedly denies it before forcing an awkward smile onto her face. Realizing that the explanation will take some time, she politely asks whether he would be willing to hear the entire story inside his room, instead of discussing such matters outside where anyone might overhear them. Jeok Yi-jeon silently agrees, and the two of them soon find themselves inside Jeonnyeong Pavilion. Once they are alone, Seol-ha begins explaining everything from the very beginning. She admits that, in order to get rid of the ridiculous rumor claiming she spends the night with the second young master, she invents the existence of a fake sweetheart. Jeok Yi-jeon calmly summarizes her explanation by asking whether she is saying she creates an imaginary lover simply to silence the gossip. Seol-ha immediately nods and honestly admits that this is exactly what happens. She explains that she originally believes the rumors would naturally disappear after the elder from the medical hall becomes involved in treating the supposed illness. However, although that story reduces some of the gossip, the suspicious looks from the other maids never completely disappear. Eventually, she becomes so desperate that she drags young Seobuk into the lie as well. Even then, she never imagines that the hopelessly innocent young Seobuk would actually believe the rumors himself and come searching for her with marriage on his mind. Jeok Yi-jeon quietly listens to every word before asking one final question. He wants to know whether she and Yang Seobuk truly have no romantic relationship whatsoever. Seol-ha immediately shakes her head. She firmly explains that there is absolutely nothing between them. The two of them have simply been friends ever since they are little children running around together with dirty faces and scraped knees. According to her, young Seobuk is practically no different from a childhood friend who has always been by her side. Hearing this, Jeok Yi-jeon studies her expression for several moments before asking whether there is really any need to go to such extremes over nothing more than a rumor. Seol-ha blinks in confusion, unable to understand what he means. Jeok Yi-jeon points out that rumors are merely rumors, so he cannot see why she feels compelled to fabricate such an elaborate lie. Lowering her head respectfully, Seol-ha quietly explains that everything she does is partly for his reputation and partly for her own survival. She elaborates that if the gossip continues, she would inevitably become the target of countless jealous maids who secretly admire the second young master. Furthermore, she believes it would surely be unpleasant for someone of his status to have his name continuously entangled with an ordinary maid like herself. For this reason, every lie she tells is intended to reduce the inconvenience and displeasure caused to him, while also protecting herself from becoming the center of unnecessary hostility. She finishes her explanation with a polite smile, gently turning her face away, so he cannot see the anxious expression hidden behind it. Deep inside, however, only one desperate thought continues echoing through her mind. More than anything else, she simply wants to survive until the day she can finally leave the demonic cult behind forever. Jeok Yi-jeon quietly looks at Seol-ha before pointing out that people usually try to ease someone else's displeasure only when that person is actually angry. Seol-ha immediately nods, agreeing that this is generally true. However, she quickly adds that he never actually appears angry with her in the first place. Hearing that response, Jeok Yi-jeon falls silent for a brief moment, as though carefully organizing his thoughts. After considering her explanation, he calmly concludes that if he is never angry to begin with, then everything she does to ease his supposed displeasure is ultimately nothing more than a pointless effort. The unexpected conclusion completely catches Seol-ha off guard. Her eyes widen in confusion as she silently repeats his words inside her head, wondering whether she has somehow misunderstood what he means. For a moment, she cannot decide whether he is saying that he simply does not care about the rumors involving an ordinary maid, or whether there is some deeper meaning hidden behind his words. Instead of explaining himself further, Jeok Yi-geon suddenly changes the subject. He casually asks whether she is close with Yang Seobak. Although the abrupt question surprises her, Seol-ha honestly answers that they are indeed very close. She explains that Yang Seobak has been her childhood friend for as long as she can remember. Their relationship is so comfortable that he frequently visits her grandmother's house just to freeload meals without feeling the slightest bit embarrassed. Even while answering, she continues wondering about Jeok Yi-geon's previous statement. She cannot stop asking herself whether his remark means that he genuinely pays no attention to the rumors surrounding the two of them, or whether he simply chooses not to care. Jeok Yi-geon once again changes the conversation by unexpectedly asking about her grandmother. Hearing the question causes Seol-ha to blink in surprise. She does not even remember mentioning her grandmother during the current discussion, making her wonder why he suddenly becomes interested. Nevertheless, she politely explains that her grandmother is simply an ordinary woman who runs a humble noodle shop outside the castle walls. Listening to her description, Jeok Yi-geon quietly remarks that he is suddenly becoming curious about how those noodles actually taste. He casually comments that he should visit the shop himself someday. Seol-ha immediately smiles with genuine pride and replies that, in her opinion, it is the best noodle shop anywhere. However, she quickly adds that the establishment is far too modest to properly receive someone of his noble status. Therefore, rather than allowing him to visit such a shabby place, she promises that she will simply recreate her grandmother's recipe and personally prepare the noodles for him someday instead. Before the conversation can continue any further, another voice suddenly echoes through the room. The newcomer asks exactly where this famous noodle shop with the supposedly best noodles can be found. Both Seol-ha and Jeok Yi-geon instinctively turn toward the entrance. The moment Seol-ha recognizes the newcomer, her entire body stiffens. Standing there is none other than the heavenly demon himself. With a warm smile, he casually remarks that even this honored one has become curious about the taste of those famous noodles. Startled beyond belief, Seol-ha immediately drops to the floor and respectfully greets the heavenly demon. However, the heavenly demon gently tells her that such formalities are unnecessary and instructs her to stand comfortably instead. Jeok Yi-geon respectfully addresses him as father before asking what brings him to Jeonnyeong Pavilion. The heavenly demon calmly explains that although he rarely visits this residence in the past, he has found himself stopping by more frequently lately. His attention then shifts towards Seol-ha before he asks his son whether he is responsible for her current condition. After briefly observing her, he remarks that the scattered internal energy throughout her body has now settled remarkably well inside her dantian. He admits that he has been somewhat concerned about her unusual condition beforehand, so seeing such stable progress pleases him. He openly praises Jeok Yi-geon for handling the situation well. Hearing this leaves Seol-ha stunned. Until this moment, she has no idea that even the heavenly demon has been aware of the strange state of her body all along. Curious about his son's methods, the heavenly demon asks exactly which martial arts he has already taught her. Jeok Yi-geon calmly explains that, for the time being, he has instructed her in the demon breath sword technique, along with the demon breath step movement technique. Beginning the following day, he intends to continue her training by teaching her the 5 elements demon sword. The heavenly demon nods with visible satisfaction before turning his full attention towards Seol-ha. After studying her for several moments, he unexpectedly asks whether she would also like to learn martial arts directly from this honored one. The proposal strikes Seol-ha like a bolt of lightning. Completely bewildered, she can only stare at him before timidly asking why someone as exalted as the heavenly demon would personally teach martial arts to an insignificant maid, such as herself. The heavenly demon simply smiles and replies that opportunities like this are exceptionally rare. Therefore, rather than wasting such fortune, she should simply accept it. He further declares that he is willing to personally pass down whichever martial art she desires most. Those words leave Seol-ha standing completely frozen. Inside her mind, countless thoughts immediately begin racing. She cannot understand what the heavenly demon is actually planning. She has spent all this time desperately trying not to stand out, yet somehow she now finds herself personally receiving attention from the two strongest figures within the demonic cult. At the same time, another thought quietly begins forming. Perhaps this unbelievable opportunity could finally allow her to become one of the martial arts masters she always admires while reading novels in her previous life. As excitement gradually replaces confusion, she realizes there has always been one particular martial art she secretly longs to possess above all others. Gathering her courage, Seol-ha finally raises her head and enthusiastically declares the one technique she truly wants. Rather than requesting an overwhelmingly powerful sword art or an invincible cultivation method, she honestly admits that she wishes to learn an extraordinary movement technique designed solely for escaping. Her unexpectedly practical answer leaves the entire room momentarily speechless. Seeing Seol-ha display such genuine enthusiasm for the first time, the heavenly demon suddenly bursts into hearty laughter. His deep laugh echoes throughout the entire training ground, leaving everyone present slightly surprised. After calming himself, he lets out a quiet sigh before remarking that the girl is far more spirited than he originally expected. He studies her carefully for a brief moment, as though searching through countless martial arts in his memory, before casually commenting that something flashy would probably suit her personality. Seol-ha simply stares at him in complete confusion, unable to understand what he means. After thinking for another moment, he finally nods to himself and calmly announces that he has decided on the perfect martial art for her. A short while later, the three of them move outside to the spacious training grounds. Standing with his hands behind his back, the heavenly demon reminds her that he is not someone blessed with unlimited free time. For this reason, he warns that he will only explain the technique once, and she must pay attention if she wishes to learn it properly. He then reveals the name of the martial art he intends to teach her. It is none other than the Demon Phoenix Sky-Soaring Art, an advanced Lightfoot technique. The moment those words reach her ears, Seol-ha's heart nearly stops. She can hardly believe that she is about to learn such an unbelievable martial art. At the same time, memories from the original novel immediately begin resurfacing inside her mind. She remembers that the Demon Phoenix Sky-Soaring Art is the exclusive movement technique once used by the legendary demonic queen herself. During the period when the demonic cult falls into complete chaos following the heavenly demon's disappearance, it is that extraordinary woman who single-handedly preserves the entire cult from collapsing. She later hands the throne over to the newly chosen heavenly demon before disappearing from history without leaving behind another trace. Her name eventually becomes nothing more than an untouchable legend throughout the martial world. Realizing that she is about to inherit the very same martial art causes excitement to completely overwhelm Seol-ha. She can barely contain herself as she thinks that, of all techniques, she somehow ends up receiving the legendary demonic queen's signature movement art. Without wasting another second, the heavenly demon begins demonstrating the technique himself. He explains that the foundation of every Lightfoot technique begins with explosive speed, almost like a bolt of lightning. Then, in one smooth motion, his body suddenly glides forward while he demonstrates the first movement, Phoenix Spreading Wings. Every step appears impossibly elegant, almost as though he is floating through the air rather than walking upon the earth. He explains that the core principles behind the Demon Phoenix Sky-Soaring Art are recoil, fluidity, and perfect harmony. According to his explanation, every movement must naturally connect into the next without the slightest interruption. He then slowly teaches her the breathing incantation and instructs her to circulate her internal energy through her meridians exactly once, before guiding it downward into the Yongqian acupoint beneath her feet. Seol-ha immediately follows every instruction exactly as he explains it. She inhales deeply before carefully circulating the internal energy that Jiak Yijion's training recently helps her gather inside her dantian. To her surprise, the process feels far smoother than she originally expected. She quietly wonders whether all the exhausting training she has endured over the past several days is finally beginning to show results. Rather than struggling, she gradually starts understanding the flow of the technique more naturally with every attempt. A delighted smile slowly spreads across her face as she realizes that she is actually getting the hang of it. The more she practices, the more enjoyable the technique becomes. However, just as her confidence begins growing, something unexpected suddenly happens. Without any warning, her feet completely leave the ground. Her eyes widen in absolute panic as she wonders what on earth is happening. Before she can react, her entire body shoots high into the sky, like an arrow released from a bow. She immediately lets out a terrified scream as she continues soaring higher and higher above the training grounds. The incredible force behind her leap creates a powerful gust of wind that sends countless leaves swirling wildly through the air. For several terrifying moments, she feels as though she is genuinely flying. Eventually, gravity finally begins pulling her back toward the ground, allowing her to descend safely instead of crashing uncontrollably. After she lands, the heavenly demon calmly asks how it feels to fly through the sky for the very first time. Still unable to hide her excitement, Seol-ha beams with joy and enthusiastically declares that this is exactly the kind of light foot technique she has always dreamed of learning. She promises that she will definitely master it no matter how much effort it requires. Seeing her overflowing determination, the heavenly demon nods with visible satisfaction. He tells her that she possesses genuine talent and that, considering how diligently she has already been training, she will undoubtedly succeed if she continues practicing with the same dedication. Then, as though assigning a simple exercise, he points toward the massive mountain towering behind the training grounds and casually asks how she would feel about climbing it. Seol-ha blinks several times before nervously asking whether she is truly allowed to do something like that. The heavenly demon simply replies that there is no reason to hesitate. Now that she has learned the technique, she ought to make proper use of it instead of merely admiring it. Before Seol-ha can respond, Jaeok Yi-gyeon quietly steps forward. Looking completely serious, he calmly announces that he will accompany her himself. He simply tells her to come along. Hearing those words immediately catches Seol-ha off guard. She stares at him with obvious confusion before nervously asking whether he truly means that he intends to come with her personally. The thought of climbing an entire mountain alone with a terrifying second young master instantly fills her with anxiety once again, leaving her wondering what new ordeal is waiting for her this time. As Seol-ha stands there in slight disbelief, Jaeok Yi-gyeon calmly remarks that surely his father cannot personally accompany her up the mountain. Hearing that, she can only nod in agreement and admit that he has a point. However, inwardly, she cannot help thinking that she had been planning to practice comfortably by herself, without anyone watching over her shoulder. That small hope immediately disappears. Meanwhile, the heavenly demon prepares to leave. Before departing, he reminds Seol-ha to practice diligently and not waste the rare opportunity she has been given. She immediately bows respectfully and sincerely thanks him for personally teaching and guiding someone as insignificant as herself. Satisfied, the heavenly demon turns around and slowly walks away. As he leaves, he quietly remarks that youth truly is a wonderful stage of life. Watching Seol-ha's bright enthusiasm somehow reminds him of another child from the distant past. He softly comments that the child had been exactly like that at the same age. A trace of melancholy briefly appears on his face, as he reflects that, had that person's child survived, they would probably be around Seol-ha's age by now. Walking behind him, one of his loyal guards carefully asks whether His Excellency regrets the decision he made all those years ago. The heavenly demon remains silent for a moment before replying that he is not even certain whether the feeling lingering inside him can truly be called regret. However, there is one thing he knows with absolute certainty. Even if time itself were reversed and he were given another chance, he would still make the exact same choice. According to him, when a man becomes blinded by affection, even someone standing at the very peak of the martial world can become a fool. He quietly adds that even while fully knowing such affection would eventually become chains binding him for the rest of his life, he would still willingly accept those chains all over again. After the heavenly demon disappears from sight, Seol-ha eagerly begins practicing the demon phoenix sky-soaring art on her own. Excitement fills every corner of her heart as she repeatedly circulates her internal energy exactly as she has been taught. She can hardly believe she is actually performing techniques she has only seen countless times while reading martial arts web novels in her previous life. Every successful movement makes everything feel even less like a dream. Before long, her body grows noticeably lighter, and with another burst of internal energy, she launches herself gracefully into the air once again. This time, instead of panicking, she lands lightly upon the branch of a tall tree. Looking around from such a height leaves her completely awestruck. She cannot stop smiling as she thinks that she truly cannot believe this is not a dream. The feeling of moving freely through the sky is everything she had ever imagined, and even more exhilarating than she expected. As she continues leaping from one branch to another, another question gradually resurfaces in her mind. She begins wondering how she somehow possesses an entire Gabja's worth of internal energy. No matter how many times she thinks about it, she cannot remember ever receiving such overwhelming power. Her thoughts immediately drift toward her grandmother. For a brief moment, she wonders whether Madame Shin Guillaume could somehow be responsible. However, she quickly rejects that possibility herself. After thinking more carefully, she realizes that her grandmother only knows the most basic martial arts and has spent her entire life running nothing more than a humble noodle shop outside the castle walls. Then another realization suddenly strikes her. She questions whether it is even possible for someone to casually transfer nearly an entire Gabja of internal energy into another person's body. The more she considers it, the more impossible the idea sounds. Someone like Madame Shin Guillaume could never accomplish such a miraculous feat. Realizing that only deepens the mystery surrounding the immense power hidden inside her body. Unfortunately, allowing herself to become distracted proves to be a costly mistake. Just as she prepares to leap onto another tree branch, her foot suddenly slips, causing her balance to disappear completely. In the next instant, her body begins falling rapidly toward the ground below. Realizing what has happened, Seol-ha inwardly scolds herself for making such a beginner's mistake. She cannot believe she becomes so lost in her own thoughts that she completely forgets to focus on controlling her footing. Panic quickly overwhelms her as she instinctively cries out for her grandmother, while continuing to plummet through the air. Desperately trying to recover, she throws one hand forward in hopes of catching another branch or slowing her fall. However, the tremendous speed generated by the Demon Phoenix sky-soaring art leaves her completely unable to regain control. Her eyes widen in horror as the ground rushes closer and closer with terrifying speed. At that moment, she realizes there is no longer enough time to stop herself. Instinctively, she squeezes her eyes shut, preparing herself for the painful impact. Yet the expected collision never comes. Instead, she suddenly feels herself being caught by a pair of strong arms. The violent momentum comes to an immediate stop. Confused, Seol-ha slowly opens her eyes, only to find herself safely cradled in Jeok Yi-jeon's arms. The second young master holds her securely, as though catching someone falling from the sky is the most natural thing in the world. Looking down at her with his usual calm expression, he simply asks whether she is all right. The moment Seol-ha slowly opens her eyes and realizes exactly what position she is in, her entire face instantly turns bright red. Her eyes widen in complete disbelief as an unbelievable thought echoes through her mind. She wonders whether she is actually being carried in Jeok Yi-jeon's arms like a princess. Before she can even process the situation, Jeok Yi-jeon begins examining her with an unusually serious expression. Clearly worried, he immediately asks where she is hurt, questioning whether she has injured her leg or her arm during the fall. Embarrassed beyond words, Seol-ha hurriedly assures him that she is perfectly fine and explains that she is merely startled because the second young master personally catches her. For this reason, she politely smiles and tells him that this humble servant is completely unharmed, before timidly asking whether he could please put her down now. Even while making the request, she can barely bring herself to meet his eyes, her face remaining completely flushed from embarrassment. Jeok Yi-jeon, however, pays absolutely no attention to her protests. Instead, he calmly explains that after suffering a fall, a person should never move carelessly before their condition is properly examined. According to him, they are going straight to the medical hall, and she simply needs to endure it for a little longer. Hearing those words leaves Seol-ha completely stunned. She immediately protests that there is no need to visit the medical hall because she truly is not injured at all. Unfortunately, before she can finish speaking, Jeok Yi-jeon suddenly launches himself into the air while still carrying her securely in his arms. Using his incredible lightfoot technique, he rapidly crosses the distance until they arrive at the medical hall only moments later. Without slowing down, Jeok Yi-jeon pushes open the entrance with enough force that the doors slam loudly against the walls. The sudden noise startles everyone inside. Every physician and attendant immediately turns toward the entrance before hurriedly bowing in greeting. Several of them nervously ask what brings the second young master to the medical hall personally. Ignoring everyone else, Jeok Yi-jeon immediately demands to know where the head physician is. Before anyone else can answer, an elderly man calmly steps forward from inside the hall and casually asks what all the commotion is about. Both Seol-ha and Jok-gi-gon turn toward the newcomer. The elderly man calmly asks, "What brings the second young master here today?" He is none other than the head of the medical hall, elder physician Pyo Jin-young. Hearing him address Jok-gi-gon so casually immediately catches Seol-ha's attention. She cannot help wondering whether it is really acceptable for someone to speak so informally to the heavenly demon's own son. To her even greater surprise, Jok-gi-gon respectfully asks whether his uncle has been keeping well all this time. The single word uncle instantly leaves Seol-ha speechless. Inside her mind, countless pieces of information immediately connect together. She remembers that Pyo Jin-young is one of the demonic cult's legendary 6 demon masters and is widely feared throughout Murim for his unparalleled mastery over poisons. He also belongs to the famous Pyo clan of myriad poisons. Realizing that Jok-gi-gon addresses him as uncle causes another shocking conclusion to form inside her mind. She finally understands that Jok-gi-gon's mother must have originated from the Pyo clan of myriad poisons. That revelation instantly explains another mystery from the original novel. No wonder every attempt to poison Jok-gi-gon always ends in failure. With blood from the Pyo clan flowing through his veins, it suddenly makes perfect sense. Meanwhile, Jok-gi-gon wastes no time explaining the situation. He asks Elder Pyo Jin-young to examine Seol-ha immediately, stating that she may have suffered internal injuries after falling from a tree. Still resting awkwardly in his arms, Seol-ha feels her embarrassment reaching its absolute limit. Elder Pyo looks between the two of them, before curiously asking how such an accident even happens. Jok-gi-gon calmly replies that she simply slips from a tree branch while practicing and falls. Listening to that explanation, Seol-ha can only smile awkwardly to herself, inwardly admitting that the story sounds completely ridiculous even to her own ears. To her surprise, Elder Pyo immediately shakes his head and dismisses the concern. According to his experienced judgment, there is absolutely no need to check her pulse or examine her for internal injuries. He confidently states that the girl appears perfectly healthy. Hearing that immediately irritates Jok-gi-gon. He questions how Elder Pyo can casually declare her healthy when her face currently looks like that. He even asks whether everyone intends to simply stand there watching while Seol-ha remains injured, insisting that Seol-ha herself says she is hurt. Those words instantly leave Seol-ha speechless. Inside her mind, she cannot help protesting that she never actually says anything like that in the first place. At that moment, Elder Pyo suddenly pauses as though something has just occurred to him. He looks at her more carefully before asking whether she is perhaps the Seol-ha, who recently becomes this troublesome brat's personal maid. Seol-ha politely bows her head and confirms that he is correct. Elder Pyo smiles with visible curiosity before admitting that he has already heard quite a lot about her and has been wondering what kind of girl she truly is. However, he certainly never expects their first meeting to happen under such unusual circumstances. Still confused by the entire conversation, Seol-ha quietly watches him as he gestures toward a nearby seat. Elder Pyo calmly tells her to sit down first so that he can examine her properly. Without waiting for another word, Jok-gi-gon immediately lowers Seol-ha from his arms and gently helps her onto the seat exactly as instructed. Elder Pyo Jin-young soon reaches into his sleeve and takes out a small container before placing it in Seol-ha's hands. He calmly explains that the ointment inside can heal almost any wound completely within a single day. The moment she hears those words, her eyes begin sparkling with amazement. The elder proudly adds that the medicine also happens to be one of his personal masterpieces. Listening to such confidence, she cannot help responding with genuine admiration. Elder Pyo then gestures for her to come closer, explaining that he will personally apply the ointment to her wound. Startled by the offer, Seol-ha hurriedly refuses, insisting that someone of her lowly status should never receive such treatment and that she can apply it herself. However, Elder Pyo simply smiles and remarks that it would pain him to see such a pretty face left with a scar. He casually adds that he cannot allow someone else to become upset over something like that either. Hearing those words leaves Seol-ha completely puzzled, and she cannot help wondering why anyone else would supposedly become upset when she is the one who gets injured. Before Elder Pyo can move any closer, Jok-gi-gon suddenly notices what is happening. Without saying a word, he quietly walks over. Elder Pyo looks up in confusion and asks why Yi-jeon is coming over. The very next moment, Jok-gi-gon calmly snatches the ointment directly out of Elder Pyo's hand. The elder immediately cries out in disbelief while loudly protesting at the brat's shameless behavior. Completely ignoring the complaints, Jeokgi-jeon turns around and places the container into Seol-ha's hands instead, calmly instructing her to apply the ointment to the wound herself. Looking at him with grateful, sparkling eyes, Seol-ha happily accepts it and sincerely thanks him. Deep inside, she assumes that even Jeokgi-jeon thinks it would be excessive for a mere maid like her to receive direct treatment from the legendary elder physician himself. Watching the entire exchange, Elder Pio simply clicks his tongue before remarking that men truly are strange creatures. Rather than arguing any further, he tells Seol-ha to keep the entire container instead of returning it after one use. He carefully instructs her to apply the ointment generously over every injured area and reminds her that if her body begins feeling unusual afterward, she should immediately return to the medical hall so he can examine her again. Seol-ha smiles brightly before thanking the elder once more with complete sincerity. As she carefully stores away the priceless ointment, she cannot help thinking that becoming Jeokgi-jeon's personal maid is not entirely a bad thing after all. Simply because she serves him, she continues receiving all kinds of special treatment she could never have imagined before. On top of that, she somehow obtains an incredibly precious medicine, personally created by one of the 6 demon masters. Thinking about everything that happens today, she concludes that it has actually been an unbelievably lucky day. Before long, the night quietly passes, and a brand new morning arrives. The following day, as Seol-ha goes about her usual duties, one of the maids suddenly notices the scratches still visible on her face. The maid immediately cries out in surprise before jokingly asking whether Seol-ha somehow rolls all the way down a hill overnight. Seol-ha awkwardly laughs before casually explaining that she merely slips a little while climbing a tree. Then, noticing that Seo-ok appears to be dressed much more neatly than usual, she curiously asks whether she is going somewhere special that day. Blushing slightly, Seo-ok happily explains that her parents come to visit her. She reveals that they have always been occupied with farming while raising her younger siblings, and for this reason, this is actually the very first time they are able to visit her in nearly 5 years. Hearing that, Seol-ha smiles warmly and comments that it must be wonderful, adding that her parents must have enjoyed sightseeing around the main city while they are there. However, Seo-ok immediately looks at her with visible confusion and asks what sightseeing has to do with anything. She explains that ordinary people, like her parents, cannot simply enter the demonic cult's inner grounds whenever they wish. She then asks whether Seol-ha somehow forgets everything taught during their orientation. According to her explanation, only people with special permission or those of sufficiently high status are allowed to enter the restricted areas, and such privileges certainly do not apply to ordinary commoners like their families. The explanation instantly leaves Seol-ha completely speechless. Her mouth slowly falls open as a shocking realization begins forming inside her mind. She quietly remarks that something about this feels incredibly strange. After all, her own grandmother has already visited her not once, but twice. If ordinary civilians truly cannot enter these grounds, then how exactly does Modem Shinjiam manage to come and go so freely? The more she thinks about it, the more suspicious everything becomes. Countless strange incidents involving her grandmother suddenly begin replaying inside her mind, one after another. Unable to ignore the growing mystery any longer, Seol-ha quietly asks herself exactly who Madame Shinjiam really is.